You can spit on his grave. You can spit on his grave. A quick wave of magic swept across Hampstead Garden in the London suburbs, over the wizarding village in Wiltshire, past the low woods beside the lake, and finally stalled before the long-sealed, desolate gates of Crouch Manor. A crisp pop of air echoed across the empty lawn. The space seemed to expand and bloom as if a tunnel had torn open in the air. Figures in the flicker, Loren, Wheat, and Winky, stepped through. Hermione followed close behind, still a little stunned. Her thoughts clung to the last dozen confusing minutes. After breakfast, she had burst into someone's bedroom, been unexpectedly intercepted by a wizard and two house elves, eaten a second luxurious breakfast, and been transported, bewildered, to this manor. "Is this Mr. Crouch's house?" Hermione whispered, leaning toward Loren. "To let Winky put the past behind her and start anew," Loren said. The explanation sounded thin even to his own ears. After a throat-clearing aside, he added, "And because Voldemort might have been here, I want to look for clues about Horcruxes." From his first year at Hogwarts until now, he and Dumbledore had found 5 of the 7 Horcruxes: the Ravenclaw diadem, Tom Riddle's diary, the Gaunt ring, Hufflepuff's cup, and Harry himself, while the trail for Slytherin's locket had also shown promise. Nagini had been spotted in Albania, and Dumbledore had found her first, leaving a hole in his pursuit. Given those uncertainties, Loren suspected Voldemort could have made another Horcrux no one yet knew about. Winky did not hear that whispered conversation. She stood before the brass seal and the ministry notice, her eyes filling with tears, voice sharp with grief. "Yes, this is the old Crouch house. Winky's mother served here her whole life, and her mother before her. They were all proud to be with Master Crouch, but for Winky, everything changed. Winky failed them." Hermione, who had already learned something of Winky's state at breakfast, spoke gently. "Hogwarts is a good place. Maybe one day your children will look up to you, even if they don't work at the school." Winky shook her head. Tears dripped from her pointed nose. Loren swept his gaze over the manor. The village was one of those old, pure-blood enclaves, where families among the Sacred 28 owned estates and watched one another's honor. Crouch Manor sat on the west side, a slow stream, a scattered yet plentiful copse, high outer walls and turrets that shut the house off from the rest of the world. A straight stone path led to the gate, and the house's seclusion made casual visitors feel awkwardly distant, as if they might wonder whether their relationship with the owner warranted the visit. He turned back to Winky. The house elf was still trembling after insisting she wanted to stay at Hogwarts, but made no unreasonable demands. Loren knew she had grown used to the paid, holiday-filled life there, but deep down the custom of serving the Crouch family, passed down from her grandmother, still held weight. Crouch's death meant the chain could be severed. Loren bent slightly to meet her eyes. "You know Mr. Crouch is dead, but you don't know the whole story, do you?" Winky straightened and cried out, "Mr. Crouch would never be a Death Eater. He did his ministry job with all his heart. Winky can swear it." "What about Barty Crouch Jr.?" Loren asked. Winky's pupil contracted. The righteous fury on her face froze. She shook her head. Loren continued, steady and cold. "You know how Mr. and Mrs. Crouch disguised things, how they tried to make it look like their son was the one in Azkaban. You saw Barty Crouch Jr. grab a wand and make the dark mark during the chaos at the Quidditch World Cup final. You were dismissed because you failed to watch him properly." Winky's breathing became shallow. Under the weight of those dark eyes, she barely dared to breathe. Loren did not press for confessions. He only looked toward the sealed gate and said, "But there are many things you don't know." Hermione followed his gaze, taking in the manor's exterior with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Winky looked bewildered. "On the night you were expelled," Loren said quietly, "Barty Jr. broke free of his father's control, but he didn't run away. He went back to the manor." Loren and Hermione stepped forward. He tapped his wand. The seal unlatched and floated down. The gate opened. "He found the master he wanted," Loren said. "With Voldemort, he turned Mr. Crouch into a vessel. They performed the resurrection ritual. Crouch's body, blood, and magic fed Voldemort's new form. Afterward, they dumped him in the wilderness." Master Barty! Master Barty!" Winky shook, sobbed, and stumbled after them into the house. Wheat, trailing at the back, watched with thoughtful small eyes. Dust lay like a thin veil over furniture and floors. Crystal chandeliers hung without lampshades, the oil in the sconces had gone cloudy, and the wicks were nothing but black stubs. The fireplace held a jumble of ashes. "No one's lived here for a long time," Hermione said, scanning the room. "Since the Triwizard Tournament, Crouch, or whoever used this house, hasn't returned." She picked out the signs, a fresh trail of footprints leading neatly up the stairs and into other rooms. Ministry officials must have come in to seal the place. Loren's eyes moved between the lamps and the hearth. There were faint impressions on the sofa, but when he tried to piece together the last movements here, nothing pointed to Voldemort. Time had stripped away residual magic. He found many magical objects, but no Horcruxes, and not even dark arts paraphernalia. "Winky would never have let this house get so dusty," she blurted. Winky snapped her fingers, and a clean rag appeared midair, as if she were about to begin a major cleaning. Loren took her wrist and shook his head. "Don't do anything unnecessary," he said. "Normally the ministry would call you in when investigating Mr. Crouch and his son, but someone closed the case too quickly. You were a key witness, and you were sent to an interrogation room. Do you really want to go through that again?" Winky wiped her face and said, bright with a hope that hurt, "If it could restore Mr. Crouch's reputation." "You're thinking too much," Loren cut in. "People didn't name Barty Crouch a Death Eater because no one defended him. Someone wanted him to be one." Hermione's eyes showed a flash of pity as she squeezed his hand. Before Winky could respond, a voice called from behind them. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" A woman, not young but still animated, hurried up clutching a messy bunch of poppies. Her golden hair swung as she moved in an ungainly way. This ministry employee, well known and not well liked, approached with the kind of curious, reckless frankness that made people uncomfortable. "Are you here to pay respects to Mr. Crouch, too?" Both Hermione and Winky recognized her. Bertha Jorkins, though their memories of her differed. One had seen her at the World Cup campsite 10 months ago, the other in this house years earlier. Loren watched her closely. Her questions and the vacant look in her eyes showed she didn't remember them at all. "Miss Jorkins?" Winky mumbled, staring at the poppies. Jorkins's face lit with a brief, hopeful surprise before clouding with embarrassment. "You know me?" she asked weakly. Then she laughed apologetically. "Oh dear. It must be my head. Everyone says I'm absent-minded. My cousin thinks it might be early Alzheimer's." She rambled on, then slowed and blurted, "Do introduce yourselves again. I'll try to remember this time." Hermione settled on the necessary facts. "I'm Hermione Granger, and this is Loren Morgan. We met at the Quidditch World Cup campsite and in the box." "Quidditch World Cup?" Jorkins tried to place it. Having failed, she stared at their faces and repeated their names as if pinning them down. After a long moment, she brightened. "Yes, Hermione Granger, Loren Morgan. Come on, let's pay respects to Mr. Crouch." They exchanged uneasy looks. Winky's eyes gleamed with a sudden, almost painful hope. "Pay respects? Has Mr. Crouch been buried? Where is he buried?" "Under the apple tree by the stream," Jorkins said, proud to remember. "I kept asking people until Mr. Weasley got impatient, but Rufus Scrimger, head of the Auror office, said burying him by the flowing water might wash away his impurities. Some idiots wanted him buried in Little Hangleton, but Scrimger insisted otherwise." They followed her through an untended lawn gone to wild grass and flowers. Jorkins seemed to enjoy the feel of the grass and even hummed a tuneless funeral march as if she had forgotten what death meant. Loren watched her from behind with mixed feelings. Winky's face was a storm of bitter, tangled emotions. At the small grave, Jorkins knelt and set the bedraggled poppies on the stone. "I'll miss you, Mr. Crouch, if I remember to," she muttered. Winky collapsed beside the grave, keening Mr. Crouch and Master Barty, sobbing without restraint. Hermione stood back on the stream bank with Loren and looked at the plain headstone. She knew what lay beneath. A dutiful ministry official who in hard times had supported harsh measures to protect the public, a father murdered by his son in league with a dark wizard. But seeing Bertha Jorkins' small, absent-minded figure, Hermione felt no respect for the grave. If anything, she felt the urge to spit on it. "Miss Jorkins, come look at this," Hermione called, and Jorkins, puzzled, stepped closer. Loren guided her to the stream. The water moved slowly, reflections broken by light and shadow. From somewhere just beyond the audible, as if threading into Jorkin's thoughts, a voice said, "Memories are like flowing streams. When a section is blocked, the source becomes stagnant. You need to clear the blockage, little by little." "What?" Jorkins asked, answering her own surprise. The voice chuckled softly. "You'll have nightmares for a while. Do not be afraid." A pebble skittered across the stream. The water's sound was crisp. 522, a fairly peaceful holiday. They stepped out through the outer gate of Crouch Castle and onto a long, straight flagstone path that ran through the woods. Once it might have been busy, but now only ginkgo and other trees remained. Dry yellow leaves carpeted the path, every step crunched with the sound of brittle foliage. Loren and Hermione walked side by side. Jorkins and Sparkle stayed inside the castle, looked after by Wheat. The sun rose slowly, and the world seemed reduced to their soft footfalls and distant birdsong. A few well-fed early birds perched on lush branches, tilting their heads to watch the pair without any fear. Loren scanned the surroundings as they walked. It felt like a secluded paradise, far from towns, where endless forests stretched away in every direction. A stream threaded through the trees, and dappled sunlight sifted through the canopy to pool on the flagstones and the fallen leaves, making everything calm and gentle. Behind them, Crouch Castle's outer walls had begun to yellow and crack. Roots from unknown seeds had taken hold in the neglected mortar and were already sprouting. In time, vines would climb the stones and color them green. The place had a future now. The old owner would not be coming back. Loren took Hermione's slender hand and swung it in a wide arc above them. When their hands reached the top of the motion, his grip loosened and they fell back under gravity, tracing another arc. He kept them swaying like that. Hermione turned her head and rolled her eyes. "Is this fun?" "Very," Loren said simply. Hermione's expression was resigned. He squeezed her hand again. She couldn't very well hit him for swinging her arm. "Did you cure Miss Jorkins's amnesia earlier?" she asked. "It's not exactly a cure," Loren admitted as he walked, still swinging her hand. "She'll get flashes for a while. Memories sealed by Crouch will intrude on her dreams. Once she remembers everything, she should be able to break the memory charm's hold herself." "And what about Lockhart?" Hermione asked. "No," Loren shook his head. Lockhart's spell did far more than erase bits of memory. It damaged his mind, his ability to think properly. Miss Jorkins's injury is lighter. She can still reason. Lockhart, it's worse. Listening to him ramble, Hermione breathed a quiet sigh. A weight lifted from her chest. At least Mr. Crouch hadn't been ruined beyond help. If Jorkins recovered her memories, Hermione hoped she would be able to return and pay her respects in peace. A few birds chirped, then launched into the sky, leaving feathers drifting down like soft confetti. High above them, the spire of the castle seemed to point into the clouds. Albus Dumbledore stood on the tower's top floor, his wide robes stirred by the wind. His white beard was gathered with a simple band. He gazed out across the lake, the forbidden forest, and the path they had been walking, his expression calm and slightly distracted, as if an old man content simply to look at the world. Severus Snape stood behind him, his face a mask of control as he reported recent intelligence. "He thinks the accident that night was connected to the prophecy," Snape said flatly. "He pressed me for the full text, but I do not know it." Snape hesitated, and for the first time his face twitched. "He's discovered that all prophecies are kept in the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry. He has planted someone inside the Ministry to steal them." Dumbledore's voice remained peaceful, amused rather than alarmed. "Do not worry, Severus. Alastor and I have looked into it. The orbs that store the prophecies cannot be removed by anyone not concerned by the prophecy itself." Snape's face went darker. "So only he and Harry." "Harry is hidden in a safe place," Dumbledore said. "I've arranged for Mundungus Fletcher to watch over him." Snape sneered. "That disreputable peddler? Albus, do you truly trust him?" "I have other safeguards," Dumbledore replied, "and Mundungus lacks the courage for a thing like that, especially after seeing what he has seen." Snape studied him, annoyance sharp enough to be almost physical. "How is Harry with occlumency?" Dumbledore smiled faintly. "His mind is so open you might hear echoes in it, enough room for a hippogriff to gallop freely until it grows tired and cannot find a perch." Snape's sneer turned into a clipped remark. I have never met such a foolish student. Willingness to open one's heart is rare, Dumbledore answered. Give him time to learn, and his strengths will show. Bates sat up straight at the breakfast table, hair still untidy from sleep. He had just washed and brushed his teeth. His gray hair had yet to be tamed. Before him lay a nearly perfect fried egg with a slightly golden yolk, warm bread fresh from the oven, glossy fried sausages, and a few blanched greens, a balanced, tempting meal. He frowned just a little as he wondered, as he had since Loren was 8 years old. Who had raised this child? Which youngster had learned to cook with such care? Who would make such a luxurious breakfast for a parent on vacation and wake before dawn to do it? He had been up late the night before, writing and rewriting letters until dawn. He'd overslept and missed his chance to impress the boy with breakfast. Now, having eaten the last bite and washed it down with warm milk, Bates burped contentedly and heard the front door open. Loren entered, changed his shoes, and came into the kitchen. Bates cleared his throat. "Where did you go this morning?" "To uphold fairness and justice in the magical world," Loren replied automatically. "Talk like a normal person," Bates muttered. Loren clicked his tongue. "The air was nice. I walked by the river with Hermione." "That's better," Bates said, softer. "Be good to Hermione. Don't tease her too much. Sometimes it's fine to let her win." "You've never been in a relationship. What do you know?" Loren shot back. "I haven't known," Bates protested indignantly, puffing his beard. "You little brat, you've been at school too long without a proper scolding." "Did I say anything wrong?" Loren asked, amused. "I haven't gotten married," Bates snapped. "Not that I haven't had company." "Really? Tell me about it." Bates huffed, launching into one of his stories about past glories. Loren watched him with a small smile. Moving from the mountain pastures to the city and no longer tormented by lycanthropy had done Bates a world of good. He looked healthier, more relaxed. "Last month, at the bank's charity gala, I stole the show," Bates said, puffing up. "Many admirable women wanted to dance with me." "Uh-huh. What's for lunch?" Loren cut in. Bates fumbled for a change of subject. "Whatever you make. Roasted lamb." "That needs marinating," Loren said. "Too late for today." "Then tomorrow. I'll buy it this afternoon." "Fine. Get some beef brisket, too. I'll make tomato shrimp pasta for a quick lunch. Then we'll stew brisket for dinner and use the marinade for stir-fries. Invite the neighbors." "Oh, yes." Bates's eyes crinkled at the thought of Loren's cooking. For a moment he felt like an irresponsible parent again, a mixture of pride and helplessness. By the evening of July 1st, they finally ate the roasted lamb, 5 days later than Loren had planned. Bates had been meticulous about the meat, insisting on top quality. It took 2 days of bargaining with an acquaintance before he procured a freshly slaughtered lamb. The lamb had been marinated a full day and roasted nearly half a day. It came out a beautiful golden brown with a crisp skin and a rich, meaty aroma that filled the courtyard. Dipped in plum sauce, chili paste, or mixed dry spices, each bite was juicy enough to make one want to suck the bones clean. 3 parents and 2 children tore into the roast. Wendell, who had been furious when his daughter's letter first arrived and had threatened to give Loren a piece of his mind, found himself enchanted within a week. He munched with oil-rimmed lips, already planning to spend more time with Loren that summer, perhaps take him fishing, and finally teach him not to rely on Transfiguration for every tackle. Wendell grabbed a piece, dipped it into Loren's spicy rub, and immediately gasped as heat flooded his mouth. He guzzled iced cola and panted, cheeks red. Monica handed him tissues, half laughing, half exasperated. "Such a grown man," she teased. Hermione ate more delicately, but had already amassed a small pile of bones in front of her. Bates sat beside her, carving the lamb and chuckling at the table's contentment. Loren rested for a moment, spinning a copper nut between his fingers. He had set the nut into a pendant that buzzed faintly when it received a message. Tiny pale letters scrolled across the metal. "To Loren Morgan. Just got home. Only my mum's here. I asked what's going on with you-know-who. She scolded me." "To Loren Morgan. Why aren't you replying?" "To Loren Morgan. Is this thing broken? Is it out of range?" Loren smirked. Draco Malfoy remained the same relentless chatterbox. Loren poked the nut and tapped a single command, "Read." The coin vibrated and more messages unrolled. "To Loren Morgan. It wasn't broken after all." Why are you only replying now? I was going to send an owl. Loren skimmed the rest, found nothing useful, and tapped Canyons. Read again before tucking the nut back into his pendant and reaching for another piece of lamb. It looked like Lord Voldemort had not taken up residence at Malfoy Manor. The family were keeping Draco deliberately sheltered from Death Eater affairs. Boredom for Draco this summer seemed likely, but Lucius Malfoy had the cunning to survive. Hermione had, at some point, sat down beside him and was staring at the pendant. He noticed her look and grinned, sliding a tenderloin dipped in salt and pepper into her mouth. "What are you staring at?" he teased. "Keep looking, and you'll put on 10 pounds this summer." Hermione blinked, then swallowed and frowned as the lamb's deliciousness registered. Lauren's triumphant smile widened. A cup of lukewarm water sat on the wooden cabinet beside the bed, forgotten and untouched. A small Muggle alarm clock stood next to it. The four-poster single bed, styled like something out of Hogwarts, made it obvious the blonde woman sleeping in it was unmarried. A few fine lines traced her eyelids. She was past 30, but a girl-like softness still lingered in her face. She slept fitfully, forehead damp with sweat, stray hairs stuck to her furrowed brow. "Ah!" Bertha Jorkins woke with a start, patting at her chest as if to chase away the remnants of fear. She swallowed and said aloud, "What a vivid nightmare." In her dream, she had been trapped in a small room, watched over by a house elf, pacing with a sharp carving knife. There had been an empty chair, and impossibly, the sense of someone sitting there, an invisible but real presence watching her. She picked up the cold water from the bedside table and drank in big gulps, her eyes wandering around her little flat. The room from her dream, expensive furnishings, blank picture frames on the walls, hovered at the edge of her memory. Only old pure-blood families kept living portraits, yet all the canvases in that room had been cut away, as if someone didn't want them to see what was happening. The alarm clock began to ring with an ear-splitting dinging. Jorkins jerked, hand going instinctively for her wand. Then a memory clicked. Mr. Weasley had shown her how to use it. "Just press the round button on top," he'd said. She patted the small button and pushed. The vibrating clamor stopped as if snuffed. A ridiculous little bloom of satisfaction spread through her. She had been given that alarm clock when she was on rotation in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures to assist Mr. Weasley. She'd been hopeless with Muggle gadgets in that office. They'd given up trying to keep her there. Before she moved to the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, Arthur Weasley had given her the clock. It usually woke her on time, but she always forgot how to turn it off and had to silence it with a freezing charm or a confundus. Today, she'd actually remembered. She scratched her head, planning to tell Mr. Weasley at work that she'd finally managed it, and then noticed the time. She slapped her forehead and leapt from bed. "Oh no, I'm going to be late." A few minutes later, a wooden table was set in the tiny open-plan kitchen. Plain plates with warm bread, an uneven fried egg, a half-charred smoked sausage, and a mug of milk she'd forgotten to heat. She had already changed into her work clothes. Grabbing everything, she made a hasty sandwich, swallowed it in a couple of big bites, and downed the cold milk. She waved her wand in a rough, efficient cleaning charm that left the plates briefly shining, but not put away. She shoved on shoes and socks, grabbed her handbag, and ran for the door. The white-painted door clicked shut behind her. The inside was plastered with sticky notes, things to bring, unfinished tasks, the week's schedule, and shopping reminders. For a shocked second, she opened the door again, then darted to the fireplace, scooped a handful of flue powder, and stepped into the green flames. "Ministry of Magic," she called. Sorry, please wait." She shoved through the last elevator just as the doors began to close. It was the lift from the atrium on level 8, and she let out a grateful breath as it rose. Inside were a few familiar faces. She smiled and nodded, clutching her bag. "Good morning, Mr. Weasley. Good morning, Mr. McNair. Good morning." The younger man, Percy, offered a polite smile. "Good morning, Miss Jorkins. I'm Percy Weasley, Department of International Magical Cooperation." "Oh, another Mr. Weasley," Bertha gabbled. "Just call me Percy. Oh no, call me Percy. No, call me Percy." She blushed and stumbled over her words. "As it happens, I have a document to take to the minister for his reply." "Very well." Percy's tone was careful. He introduced himself properly, and for a beat, Bertha looked as if she might show off. "Mr. Weasley," she brightened. "I finally managed to turn that noisy clock off the normal way today." "Really? Is it useful? Does anything need improving?" "My clock can even play Christmas carols," Percy said, trying to sound helpful. "That sounds lovely," she began, then faltered as the lift chimed and the metal gate slid open on level 4. Walton McNair, from the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, gave a derisive snort and stalked out. The elevator continued upward, and Bertha blinked at Percy. "Mr. Weasley, isn't the Department of International Magical Cooperation on level 5? Why are we still going up?" Percy glanced at the document in his hand and hesitated. He didn't have to explain. Arthur Weasley did. The older Mr. Weasley, Arthur, put a hand on Percy's arm with an indulgent chuckle. "My son and I have a few things to discuss. He'll come by my office for a bit. Miss Jorkins, could you hand that document to the minister for me?" "Dad," Percy mouthed, but Arthur only winked. "Thank you, Bertha," Arthur said to her, already passing the document to Jorkins as the elevator eased into level 2. Then he squeezed Percy out of the car, and they walked off together, father and son, already arguing softly. As the golden gate slid closed, Percy let out a helpless sigh. "It's going to cause trouble, Dad." Arthur looked at his son with the easy certainty of long practice. "She looked better just now, able to greet someone and chat. Let her run it. Come sit in my office for a while. Give it an hour. If anything goes wrong, you can sort it out." Percy resisted. "I could wait in my own office. Mr. Crouch left a lot for me to deal with." "I heard Amelia Bones has taken Crouch's place," Arthur interrupted. "Is that so? Then give her room to settle in. It'll help her get on top of things." Arthur began talking as they walked, his voice low. "Walton McNair being on time today, that's rarer than a telephone. If there's no execution to attend to, he's usually mixing in some tavern." Percy frowned. "I've noticed something else. He keeps going to the Department of Mysteries, takes the lift all the way down. Aurors go there a lot too." Arthur's face clouded. "That's not right. That Death Eater isn't right. I must tell." "Tell who?" Percy tried to catch what his father was saying, but Arthur only muttered and changed the subject. "You'll know soon enough," he said, evasive. Bertha pushed the heavy doors to the minister's office and stepped inside. The room held more than Minister Cornelius Fudge. A woman in a ridiculous wash of pink sat opposite the desk, thin lips, toad-like face. Her smirk unmistakable, even to someone as distracted as Bertha. The name floated at the edge of her mind, but she couldn't pull it into focus. "Good morning, Minister Fudge and—" Bertha stammered. Cornelius Fudge glanced at the young woman and, seeing her credentials from the rotation program, made a small frown. The woman in pink's smile vanished and was replaced by an outright expression of disgust. Her voice, thin and syrupy, cut across the room. "It's our forgetful, scatterbrained Miss Bertha Jorkins," she said, all honeyed contempt. "Do you remember why you came to the minister's office?" The question hit Bertha like a blow. She stumbled as if she'd never heard of herself before. The woman, Dolores Umbridge, snatched at the document in Bertha's hands, scoffing as she eyed the Department of International Magical Cooperation seal. "Hand it over. You can't even deliver a simple document. What use are you to the ministry? If it weren't for Crouch's recommendation, you'd be fired. Remember, fired, not dismissed." She tore the sealing cloth and handed the paper to Fudge with a fawning smile. Fudge read, and his face went a shade darker. "It's you-know-who again," he muttered. "Foreign newspapers and media are demanding answers. They want interviews with Dumbledore and with the eyewitness, Harry Potter." "Those busybodies," Umbridge said, fretting in a voice that implied she felt very protective of the minister. "They'd sooner believe Dumbledore than the official ministry line. Dumbledore's trying to make people panic, seize power through their trust. You see that too, don't you, Minister?" Fudge's worry deepened. "But people are willing to believe him. It's the eyewitness." "You mean," Umbridge prompted, her smile ice-sharp. "Harry Potter," Fudge finished grim. "They'll take a child's word over ours." "Then we can remove his credibility," Umbridge said, sweetness coating steel. "Make him seem ordinary, mischievous, a rule-breaker, poor student, anything to undermine him. If the eyewitness won't speak for Dumbledore, Dumbledore loses much of his influence." Fudge hesitated. "He's loyal to Dumbledore. We can't simply persuade a child." There are other ways, Umbridge said, her expression brightening. A few more Dementors have been posted at Azkaban lately. They haven't been registered properly. Didn't Dumbledore question our control of the Dementors? Let's show him. Fudge looked horrified. He glanced at the only other person in the room, Bertha, with a desperate, searching look, but all he met were blank, uncertain eyes. The memory of her tendency to forget made him breathe a small, shaky sigh. He glanced back at Umbridge. She smiled and added softly, "He's a loyal follower of Dumbledore. It'll look like an accident." "No," Fudge began, but his protest was weak. His timidity in office made ordering the silencing of a child hard to stomach. Umbridge's smile tightened into something that looked harmless until she spoke again. "If not that, then we let the Daily Prophet do some revealing stories about Potter's true character. What do you think?" Fudge swallowed, and then, with the minister's pen, signed the paper. He sent Bertha on her way with it. Umbridge rose with graceful speed and stepped with Bertha toward the Golden Gate. They rode the elevator down. At level 2, Bertha moved as if to get out, but Umbridge snapped at her. "You should take that document to level 5, scatterbrained Jorkins." Oh yes. Bertha hurried, flustered, and then stayed glued to the spot as the lift passed level 5. Umbridge's voice lost its saccharine lilt and sharpened into open contempt. "The Department of International Magical Cooperation is here, on this floor. Hand over the document you're carrying, foolish Jorkins." All right." Bertha scurried out, nearly tripping. Umbridge's laugh was thin and satisfied. A creature who forgot things so readily was perfect for the minister's indecision to fall back upon. The elevator continued down to level 8. Before the gate opened, Umbridge put on her sweetest smile again, walked to the flow corridor by the atrium, scooped up a handful of powder, stepped into the flames, and called, in her sugary voice, "Azkaban." 524, Harry's Holiday Life. It was the morning of the third Friday in July. The sky outside was still a deep blue, with only a faint smear of gray-white on the distant horizon. The air was muggy, and Privet Drive lay wrapped in a sleepy hush. Harry woke in a haze, fragments of a dream clinging to him, a long, dim corridor, each passage ending in a dead end or a locked door. Another nightmare. He raised a hand to his forehead. It was damp with sweat, and beside it the scar felt rough under his fingers. Lately it stung from time to time, the sure sign that Voldemort's power was growing again. That didn't surprise him. Today, it didn't hurt much. Harry let out a long, slow breath. These dreams, he guessed, had something to do with the trapped, animal fear he felt when he was awake. Outside, the flap of wings announced the newspaper owl. It landed on the windowsill, and Harry hurried over, handed a few bronze nuts to the bird, and took the Daily Prophet. He glanced at the front page and sighed, staring up at the lightening sky. The question that never left him pressed harder every day. Why hadn't anything happened yet? Anxiety and unease sat on his chest like a weight, familiar and corrosive. Every morning at 5 he woke before his alarm, paid the owl, and grabbed the paper, though lately it was pointless. The editors would surely make Voldemort's return the front-page story if anything important happened. That was the only thing Harry wanted to know. Twice a week, the owl brought 2 letters he looked forward to. One from Ron, one from Sirius. He had long ago stopped expecting useful news. Ron's letter from the first Friday of the holidays had been evasive. "Dear Harry, we can't say too much in letters. Mum told us not to put important things on paper in case they go wrong. We're busy now, but I can't tell you here. Lots has happened, and we'll tell you everything when we meet." Sirius's letter offered no hard news either, but at least it had warnings and comfort instead of teasing half-revelations. "I know this must be frustrating. Behave yourself and everything will be fine. Be careful, don't do anything reckless." Harry let his eyes drop to the driveway. The family cars that usually gleamed sat dusty. Only Vernon's had been cleaned a little more recently. The once green lawn had browned from drought. The watering hose lay unused. July slipped by, and Surrey hung heavy and hot. Privet Drive's usual pastimes, washing cars, trimming lawns, had stopped. Everyone hid inside with windows wide open, hoping for a breeze that never came. The only small pleasure in the days was the 15 minutes after dinner when he could call his friends. Until then, he filled the long hours practicing small spells in his room, enough clean water for Vernon to wash his car, ice to keep the kitchen cooler, and hoping. That evening, he watched television with the Dursleys. Vernon and Petunia sat together. Harry sat alone on a small sofa a little way off. They glanced at him now and then, wary. He looked thin. The year had carved his cheeks hollow, the lightning-shaped scar making him look ill. He wore a faded t-shirt, loose jeans, and new trainers. Nothing to mark him out, except that he used magic every morning to conjure what the Dursleys needed without their noticing. They all sat in an awkward silence while a tinny advert for Bran breakfast cereal chattered away. Harry waited for the 7 o'clock news, hunting for any muggle clue about Voldemort or Death Eaters, a big disaster, unexplained disappearances, odd accidents. The headlines were trivial. Spanish baggage handlers strike enters second week, leaving holidaymakers stranded at airports. If it were me, I'd make them enjoy a lifetime of siestas. Vernon barked, but Harry hardly listened. If anything major had happened, it wouldn't be about airports. More dull stories followed. Drought in the southeast, a helicopter crash in a Surrey field, a famous actress getting divorced, and at the end, Bungie the Budgerigar had learned to water ski to beat the heat. Then a sudden, sharp crack split the evening. Harry shot up, his hand already going to his pocket to draw his wand like a sword. He was sure someone had apparated nearby. Friend or enemy? As he scanned the street, two big purplish-red hands grabbed him by the collar and hauled him back. "Put it away, boy, quickly. Don't let anyone see it," Uncle Vernon hissed into his ear. Then Vernon leaned out the window and shouted in an exaggerated voice, "What a charming evening. Did you hear that car backfiring? Scared Petunia and me half to death." Harry noticed heads appearing at neighboring windows, then shrinking away when they caught his expression. Vernon turned on him, furious. "What in the world are you playing at, boy?" "What did I do?" Harry said. "Making that noise, like a shot, right outside our window." "That wasn't me." "Don't be clever," Vernon snapped. "I know what you're up to. You want to do something outrageous because Dudley's been showing off." Harry blinked. Vernon actually thought he'd made the noise to show off. He swallowed the retort. Petunia, suddenly quieter, said, "You've used enough magic this holiday. You must obey the rules, Harry, or—" "It wasn't me," Harry protested, but he couldn't explain. Vernon threatened to lock him in the shed if it ever happened again. Petunia's voice was flat. "Harry, call Duds back. We're having dinner." "Got it," Harry muttered and left, putting on a face of resignation. He trudged out, hardly watching where he put his feet, and made for the playground. The Dursleys were ludicrously gullible about Dudley. Every night he pretended to be off for tea at a friend's house, and they believed him. Harry had seen enough of Dudley's evenings in Little Winging to know the truth. Dudley and his gang wrecked things at the playground, smoked at corners, and tormented anyone who passed. He hopped the locked playground gate and crossed the dry grass. The place was empty. He found a swing Dudley hadn't smashed yet and sat, one arm thrown over the chain, staring at the ground. Dudley would turn up in time for dinner. He always did. So Harry waited. Night fell slowly, humid and soft, the dry grass smell in the air, the distant hum of traffic the only sound. He don't know how long he sat there when laughter drifted across the playground. A group of boys crossed in front of the streetlights. Dudley was at the head. He'd lost some weight after a year of diet and a dab of boxing training, looking more muscular than morbidly fat, which made his punches meaner, not better. Harry watched them go, then followed at a distance as they drifted down the road, crude jokes trailing behind them. At the corner, the group split. Dudley hummed and strolled on with a couple of friends. "Hey, Duds," Harry called. "Oh, it's you," Dudley replied, annoyed. "When did you start being called Duds?" "None of your business. Who did you beat up tonight?" "Who knows?" They turned into a narrow alley, darker than the streets because no lamplight reached it. One side was a garage wall, the other a high fence. Their footsteps echoed thinly. "Very impressive, Duds," Harry said, then froze. For a flash of a second, he felt like a first-year Malfoy, an image that unnerved him. Dudley shivered suddenly and inhaled sharply, as if someone had poured icy water over him. The pleasant night turned cold in an instant. The stars and the moon and the dim streetlights seemed to be swallowed, and the sound of traffic and rustling leaves faded until only the two of them breathing filled the alley. "What are you doing?" Dudley's voice shook. "Quiet. No, it's not me." A damp, rotten smell filled the air, and a chilling despair crawled up Harry's spine. The hairs on his neck prickled, a cold sank into his limbs and made him stand rigid. He knew the sensation too well, the oppressive weight, the sucking cold. Dementors had come. Privet Drive. Lumos. Under the pale white glow of the illumination charm, Harry peered hard at the two dark shapes before him. Massive and hooded, they hovered a foot above the ground, their faces and feet hidden in shadow, gliding forward silently as if swallowing the night. Gray, slimy hands slid from one robe. A sharper, colder dread slammed into him. A foul, suffocating stench filled his lungs, and Harry took 2 stumbling steps back. Dudley, having seen Harry reel, retreated in panic. He couldn't see the figures, but he could feel a rasping whisper in his ear like a corpse breathing close by. Expecto Patro. Harry started the spell automatically, but it stumbled on his tongue. He hadn't practiced the Patronus in a long time, and the words felt awkward. He forced himself to get the pronunciation right and recited it clearly. Expecto Patronum. Silver mist flowed from his wand, gathering into a brilliant stag. The shining animal pawed at the ground, lowered its head, and thrust its antlers toward where a Dementor's heart would be. The silver antlers struck both of the creatures, lifting and flinging them skyward. They made rasping, ghastly noises as they were forced up and away, then vanished into the night. The stag looked back once, then dissolved into a streak of silver that burst through the gloom. Light returned to the alley, stars, moon, and streetlights, the warm summer breeze, the rustle of leaves from a neighbor's garden, the distant hum of traffic. Harry stood frozen, chest heaving. He wasn't exhausted, only shaken, curiously exhilarated underneath the panic. Dementors, in little whinging. Was it an accident? Or had Voldemort's reach already found him? Dudley was pale and drenched in sweat, trembling all over. The feeling of rot and death had been so real that Harry's reaction proved whatever had been there had been dangerous, though Dudley hadn't seen it. Terrible, sticky fear clung to him like cold mud. "Are you all right, Dudley?" Harry asked. The question snapped Dudley out of his daze. The summer heat slowly brought him back. His cracked lips trembled, then he shoved Harry away and spat. "What are you doing?" His eyes landed on the wooden stick, Harry's wand, and Dudley recoiled as if shocked, retreating several paces. Without waiting for an explanation, he bolted for the Dursleys' house, not daring to look back. "Hey!" Harry watched him run down Crescent Street. He was about to follow when loud, heavy footsteps sounded behind him. He turned and leveled his wand at the newcomer, then relaxed when he recognized his eccentric, elderly neighbor. Mrs. Fig came shuffling up, panting. Her gray hair had escaped its net, a jingling shopping bag hung from her wrist, and her slippers were almost falling off. "Mrs. Fig?" Harry began, about to tuck his wand away. "Don't hide it, silly boy," she snapped. "What if there are more of them?" She clutched her handkerchief with both hands and fretted. "Oh, I'll skin Mundungus Fletcher. I told him never to go off selling those suspicious cauldrons without permission. And look what's happened! Dementors! Thank Merlin, I had Tibbles on watch." Harry stared. Hearing words like Dementor and cauldron from the cat-loving woman who took care of him as a child stunned him. You're a witch?" "I'm a squib. Come on, let's move. It's not safe here." Mrs. Fig kept glancing around, tugging Harry toward Privet Drive. "Mundungus was supposed to be on duty to look after you until midnight, but he scarpered. That Mundungus apparated outside my house." "Wait, what?" Harry's eyes widened. "It was him. He was there." Yes, I had Tibbles hide under a car in case anything happened." Mrs. Fig's head darted left and right. Seeing Harry tuck his wand back into his jeans, she hissed, "Don't put it away. I'm no use with spells. I can't even transfigure a teabag." "Never mind the statute of secrecy now," she went on. "We're in trouble anyway. The Ministry will hear about underage magic." "The trace, right?" Harry cut in, and for a moment his mouth curved into a small smile. "They won't know. A friend already helped me remove the trace." Mrs. Fig opened her mouth, astonished, and muttered, "Oh, my dear." A sharp crack split the air ahead of them, and the smell of smoke and booze filled their nostrils. Mundungus Fletcher materialized in a bluffle of apparition, a short, scruffy man in a tattered coat, hair a messy ginger mop, eyes bloodshot and bleary. Mrs. Fig's face darkened. "Mundungus Fletcher, I'll kill you." Mundungus clutched what looked suspiciously like an invisibility cloak from Borgin and Burke's, eyes flicking between Harry and Mrs. Fig. "What's happened, Fig? We weren't supposed to. To blazes with secrecy. Dementors have come here, you irresponsible thief," Mrs. Fig ranted. "You were supposed to be on guard, not off selling stolen goods." "Dementors?" Mundungus repeated, horror on his face. "Here? Really?" "Yes, right here. Dementors attacked the boy you were meant to protect, and you went selling cauldrons." Mrs. Fig snatched his lapels and cuffed him hard. "I told you not to go." Mundungus tried to protest in a slurred fashion. "This was a one-off chance, you see." Thump, thump. "Ow!" Mundungus yelped as Mrs. Fig kept slapping him. "Enough, enough, you mad old cat. Someone needs to tell Dumbledore." "You should go tell him yourself. Where were you?" "I'm going." Mundungus howled, hands raised to protect his already bruised face. With another crack, he apparated away. Hampstead Garden, 9 o'clock in the evening. Loren sat on the sofa, waiting for Professor Granger to mark his charms essay. An analysis of the basic principles of several teleportation charms with similar effects but completely different implementation paths. Professor Flitwick had asked for an essay on charms with similar effects. He hadn't explicitly required teleportation charms, but Loren had chosen to write about them anyway. If he'd had his preference, he'd have compared the levitation charm and the summoning charm. No research required, just copy a bit from Hermione's notes and stitch together a conclusion. But Professor Granger had other standards. Hermione, in a silk nightgown, sat beside him on the sofa with a serious look, reading an essay. The lamp on the side table threw a warm light over the slightly yellowed parchment and the dense, cramped handwriting. Before the introduction of the Hogwarts Express, portkeys were used to send students to school without drawing Muggle attention. Every year, a third of students missed their portkey or the transfer time. Many also suffered from portkey sickness, symptoms including nausea and hysteria. The flu network, the mainstream public teleportation method, is also imperfect. Ash, heat, and nerves can make specifying a destination difficult. Though severe accidents are rare, they do occur. In 1855, the witch Violet Dilliman used the flu after an argument with her husband. Crying and hiccuping, she gave her mother's address and vanished. She did not reappear for 20 years. Hermione flipped back a few pages, frowning at the lack of detail about what happened next. What happened to her after that? Where was she for those 20 years? Loren glanced at her nightgown and felt his throat tighten. She mispronounced the place and ended up in the home of a handsome, wealthy wizard in Bury St. Edmunds. They fell in love and had 7 children and lived happily ever after. Hermione's eyebrows rose in disbelief. So she didn't come back, didn't divide assets with her ex-husband, didn't tell her worried mother. "That's why I didn't write it down," Loren said nonchalantly. The old-fashioned telephone on the table began to ring. Hermione glanced at it as the receiver was lifted by an invisible hand and put into Loren's. "Hello? This is Loren Morgan." Hermione, still reading, leaned forward to listen. She caught the tail end of Harry's voice telling his story. Loren half listened as Harry described the Dementors and how Mrs. Fig and Mundungus had been arranged to watch over him at Privet Drive. A familiar smell of shower gel grew closer, a warm cheek pressed against the back of the hand, holding the receiver, Hermione leaning in, soft and attentive. "It's a good thing you had the trace removed," Harry was saying over the line. "Otherwise the Ministry would be all over me. Mundungus sounds useless, like someone from Nocturne Alley, reselling stolen cauldrons. How could Dumbledore put someone like that on duty?" "Mrs. Fig won't say much, same as Ron and the others," Loren told him into the phone. Harry's voice came through, worried. "You won't believe it. Aunt Petunia knew about Dementors. She's been exchanging letters with Dumbledore. They've always known about Voldemort, and now they know he's back." Over the receiver, Harry paused, then added, "Uncle Vernon wanted to throw me out, but Aunt Petunia got a howler, and after she read a line from the letter, she let me stay." "Why do I sound like a Death Eater?" "I don't think those 2 Dementors were sent by Lord Voldemort," Harry said. "If he'd learned my address, he would have stormed the Dursleys with a whole pack of Death Eaters. But who else would want to go after me besides him? Who else?" "I'm so frustrated, Loren. Can't you see? I feel like a slug in a boiling cauldron. I'd rather be crushed into pulp by a pestle than sit here confused and helpless. Harry groaned. Mr. Weasley wrote telling me not to leave the Dursleys, and Sirius told me the same. Oh, I think that's Dumbledore's plan as well, Hermione said softly. Harry's words stumbled out faster, the anxiety bleeding into the line. But what's the point of hiding here? I don't get it. Do they really think that if you know who finds this place, the Dursleys can stop Death Eaters? They don't even use magic. Don't say that name, Loren reminded him. What? That person put a spell on his own name. It has a pull on anyone who speaks it. Is that true? Harry's voice tightened as if a block of ice had lodged in his throat. Hermione flinched. She hadn't expected such a thing either. After a long silence, Harry forced himself to calm down, drew a deep breath, and spoke in a hoarse voice. Sorry, Loren, I lost it. This feeling is eating me alive. I'm right at the center of the storm, and I can't see anything around me. Hermione held the receiver to her ear, listening to the boy's strained apology. Her lips pressed together, silent. Dumbledore asked everyone to keep it from you, for your protection, Loren said slowly. After all, you might have a connection to you-know-who. In the past, you always wanted to use that connection to spy on him, and we've talked about the dangers of that. Now he's stronger, and he could turn that link against you at any time. You wouldn't want to feed him information yourself, would you? Harry listened to Loren's half-joking, half-comforting tone and felt his scar throb. Colluding with you-know-who, personally betraying information, he sounded like some senior Death Eater. I'll learn occlumency as fast as I can, he said. Good luck, Loren replied. He wasn't optimistic. Harry had been encouraged to practice early, but progress had been slow. Occlumency simply didn't suit emotionally expressive wizards. It wasn't a matter of talent or effort, but compatibility. Loren stared at the chandelier overhead, thinking there had to be another way to sever the connection. Hermione took the phone. Harry, what are you going to do next? What else can I do? Stay at the Dursleys, Harry said miserably. She hesitated a moment, then offered her guess. After your birthday, you should be able to leave, Harry. But didn't they say... That's to keep your mother's protection going through blood. You have to stay there a month each year. After that, Dumbledore will move you somewhere safer. That's great. They ended the call and hung up. Hermione set the receiver down and leaned into Loren's arms, exhausted. Harry's right. Those Dementors weren't sent by you-know-who. They came from the Ministry. Only the Ministry can command Dementors now. I'm sure it was Cornelius Fudge or Dolores Umbridge. She punched the sofa in frustration. Do they only see power? If those Dementors were under Imperio, I'd believe it, but they weren't. Loren said slowly. Perhaps they believed, or at least hesitated for a moment, then decided it didn't matter. The Ministry needs to be cleaned out. This system is broken. Wait until you're Minister of Magic before you start reorganizing, Loren teased. I'm not joking. Neither am I. Jesting aside, they were both calmer. At least Fudge and Umbridge didn't dare to openly attack Harry. If they tried to arrest him with Aurors, it would be problematic. They could only resort to covert actions like sending non-speaking creatures, Dementors. After discussing it a while, they decided to write to Dumbledore. The fourth Friday in July, the day before the Ministry's weekly staff holiday. Before closing time, 3 people sat in the minister's office, finishing paperwork. Bertha Jorkins stood by the desk, distracted and dazed, but listening intently to the exchange between Senior Undersecretary Dolores Umbridge and Minister Cornelius Fudge. Because of a few recent blunders, the two had concluded she was an imbecile and relegated her to office errands. Only she knew the truth. Those apparent lapses weren't simple forgetfulness, but sudden intrusions of other people's hidden memories, which left her confused. After signing routine weekend documents, Fudge set down his quill and smiled across at Umbridge. Dolores. She looked up, smiling sweetly. Fudge stared at her for a long moment, then said, Azkaban sent their July report. They say you personally visited the prison and took 2 Dementors away. Those Dementors returned with signs of having been in a battle. Umbridge's smile didn't falter. She glanced at the vacant-eyed Jorkins and said in a syrupy voice, Yes, after I left that day, I went to Azkaban and issued orders to 2 of those filthy creatures. Fudge bristled. Didn't I reject that plan? Why did you disobey? Aren't you worried this could ruin us? Don't forget what happened with Crouch. My dear minister, Umbridge cooed, I was only trying to solve that problem for you. I admit I may have been overconfident, but the results prove Dumbledore's underhandedness. What are you implying? Umbridge shook her head. It seems the two Dementors were injured and fled back to Azkaban, yet the trace at Hogwarts wasn't triggered, and there have been no reports of Harry Potter breaking the restriction on underage magic. That suggests another wizard saved him. Dumbledore? Not him. Umbridge smiled a little coldly. Dumbledore has placed one of his people near Potter, a wizard from his faction we don't know. He's been building his power through Hogwarts. He wants to undermine your authority, perhaps even overthrow the Ministry. Fortunately, I saw it in time. We can counter him. Jorkins watched Fudge being manipulated and fell into uneasy thought. Hampstead Garden. The last day of July. Dumbledore's reply finally arrived. The spectacled owl Haunch had grown noticeably plumper in the few days since, but still landed lightly on the windowsill, feathers glossy, carrying a thick envelope stamped with the Hogwarts crest. Loren took the envelope, felt his heart skip, and opened it. There were two parchments, one addressed to Hermione and one to him. He set Hermione's aside and unfolded his own. Dear Loren, I know you have been waiting for my reply, but I could not write sooner. There is some ministry surveillance around Hogwarts. Fudge and Umbridge have persuaded or coerced members of the school board. There are now Death Eaters among the board and among the ministry's observers. We were prepared. Your kindness has given us another ally inside the ministry. Minerva rejected many courses of action, but to avoid exhausting our forces before the real conflict begins, I prevailed on her to make a few concessions. I am sending this letter as a new student admission notice. I learned of Harry's encounter with the Dementors. Your foresight averted many unnecessary problems. You know what I mean. The trace would have led to a difficult hearing. There is one more favor I will ask of you. We will discuss details when we meet. Finally, an early happy birthday. P.S. Please go to the Dursleys before Thursday afternoon. Alastor will bring people to escort Harry to a safe place. Come with him. Your birthday gift will be given later. Loren only remembered it was Harry's birthday when he read the last line. He scooped up Hanch and walked inside. The owl cocked its head and muttered a little coo. You've gotten so much fatter in a few days. Fine. Take a box of sweets to Privet Drive and deliver birthday wishes. Hanch blinked, indignant at being sent right back out after just returning. All right, little whinging is very close. At your speed, an hour, and you'll be there. How far is it? Loren teased. It's always been that distance. Maybe you should exercise more. Watch your diet. After nagging the owl into the sky with a parcel of sweets for Privet Drive, Loren took Hermione's letter next door. That evening, their parents learned they would be leaving soon, and the house filled with nagging and worry. You can always go to normal school first, Monica said. If it's dangerous, stay home for a while, finish middle school, go to university, and come back to the magical world later. Take a gap of a few years if you must. Mr. and Mrs. Granger kept chattering from dinner to dessert, but Grandpa Bates convinced them, helped them pack, and watched as they slipped a pile of belongings into a single pendant. For the next 2 days, Monica kept them busy buying clothes for the new school year. Wendell and Grandpa Bates played driver and porters, hauling big and small bags behind the three of them. It wasn't until August 6th that they finally had a free evening and went out to celebrate Loren's birthday. They picked a Victorian-style restaurant, pretty to look at, if not the best food. After the meal, Monica took the candles and began placing them carefully on the cake, avoiding fruit and chocolate. Loren, Hermione, she asked, you aren't going back to school on August 10th, are you? You're going to your headmistress's house first to help with some work, right? Hermione handed her a candle. It's not the headmistress's house, and I'm not sure it's the school. The letter just said a safe place. So you won't be home before term starts? Probably not. Maybe during the Christmas holidays. You said that last year, too. You never came back then. Circumstances were unexpected, Loren teased, scooping a bit of cream and honey from the side of the cake with his spoon and licking it. He grinned as Bates smacked his hand. It's my birthday cake. Can't I even taste it? Not now, Bates said flatly. Loren moved to sit beside Hermione and began playing with the restaurant's scented low-temperature candles. They smell sweet. Can I eat them? No. Hermione handed a candle to Monica, then noticed Loren's disappointed face. She pulled a piece of chocolate from her pocket and, with an amused look, unwrapped it and fed it to him. It was handmade chocolate, not too sweet and rich with cocoa. Loren brushed her finger provocatively and then nimbly dodged her swat, movements smoother than the chocolate itself. Bates watched from the side, his eye twitching. Even though this kid was his, the sight made him uncomfortable, especially with the Grangers still fussing over birthday candles. He pulled Loren aside and whispered earnestly, "What do you think you were doing? I wanted to give you a thump. I've told you 100 times. Stop teasing Hermione." For a split second, Loren actually felt embarrassed. Glancing up at his daughter and then at Loren with a disgruntled pout. The third, Mr. Bates, followed behind, muttering without stopping. "Be careful when you leave by magic. There'll be neighbors out at this time. You always say there's no danger, but it's better to be careful. Think things through when they happen. Hermione, this fellow's a bit thoughtless. Please look after him." "I will," Hermione answered dutifully. Then came a faint clattering from the kitchen below. Curious, he padded to the top of the stairs and peered down into the hall. 7 or 8 wizards stood there, squeezing the not very spacious entryway, their silhouettes picked out by a slightly yellowed light bulb. Leading them was Alastor Moody. Beside him, smiling easily, was Professor Remus Lupin. A young witch watched with bright interest, and a few others craned their necks. Loren and Hermione's faces changed in recognition. "Long time no see, Loren, Hermione." Remus stepped forward, his smile calm and steady. He looked better than Loren had seen him in New York. Tired, certainly, but composed. "Long time no see, Professor Lupin," Loren replied. "Harry's upstairs packing. Once he comes down, we can go," Remus said. Loren and Hermione learned who had come to escort Harry. Nymphadora Tonks, new Auror and Metamorphmagus, remembered by Loren for her startling appearance, was there. Tonks was the witch with the violet hair. She was young, fair, with bright dark eyes. Kingsley Shacklebolt, head of the Auror office, was tall, dark-skinned, and bald, his deep voice slow and sure. Behind them were members of the Order: Elphias Doge, Daedalus Diggle, Emmeline Vance, Sturgis Podmore, Hestia Jones, familiar faces in a familiar cause. Mad-Eye Moody led the group, long, grizzled hair, a bald patch above his right ear, one small dark bead of an eye, and the other a startling electric blue orb. A chunk of flesh was missing from his nose. He squinted both eyes suspiciously at them. "Can you guarantee it's them, Lupin?" Moody barked. "If we bring back 2 Death Eaters pretending to be them, that would be a disaster. We need to ask them. Things only they would know." Tonks drawled, sarcasm in her voice, and she shook her violet hair free. "Every meeting we have to go through this. If I hadn't forged a fake notice to get the Dursleys out of the house, they'd probably have shoved a bottle of Veritaserum into Harry. I can't stand it. You lot do your interrogating. I'm going upstairs to see Harry." Tonks bounded up the stairs. Hermione, a little baffled, scratched her head and looked to Professor Lupin. "Mad-Eye's suspicious of Harry, too. Tonks only said that for safety," Lupin explained. Remus watched Tonks, then smiled at the two of them. "So is there anything only we would know?" "We once suggested you try animagus work to deal with lycanthropy," Loren said. Lupin nodded. Loren hesitated, then asked, "How's it going, getting werewolves to adopt it?" "It's complicated, but generally going well." Lupin gestured toward Moody, as if sealing the verification, then patted Loren's shoulder. "Too many people here to talk. We should step outside. We'll be leaving on brooms soon anyway." "On brooms?" Hermione frowned. "The flu network is being watched by the Ministry. Harry hasn't passed his apparition test, and we don't have suitable port keys." Lupin glanced back to make sure no one inside could hear, then lowered his voice. "Mainly because Moody wanted to be sure there aren't traitors in this group. Only Dumbledore and a few of us know about this operation. The flight time will give us a chance to pass messages. If we get attacked, it means one of those people." He left the sentence hanging. Loren and Hermione understood. They both wanted to scan the group, but stopped themselves. Loren steered the conversation back. "Tell me about the werewolves. Is the plan working?" Lupin leaned against the hall wall and looked up at the clear night. "The theory and plan are sound. Implementation is the hard part. Most of those infected haven't had formal magical education. They don't know the principles of transfiguration. Teaching someone animagus from scratch is incredibly difficult. Thankfully, Dumbledore helped us contact Ilvermorny. They opened special classes for werewolves." "Then there are the Muggle werewolves," he went on. "They have no magic and can't learn animagus. The American Magical Congress worked with Muggle governments to set up special hospitals and supplies. They get through full moons with heavy sedatives, which is manageable, but they asked for limited research. We feared the lycanthropy leaking out, so we required complicated magical contracts from all hospital staff. It's made things even more complex." Loren and Hermione listened. These things were not unknown in fiction, contagious lycanthropy, even pandemics, so their reactions were measured. Loren considered the way lycanthropy spread and the obstacles to research without magic. "Don't worry too much," he said. "The infectivity in Muggle werewolves has been reduced. Without any grasp of magic, they won't uncover anything major. That's why we consulted magical creatures experts, healers, and researchers," Lupin replied. "We only agreed to this once we were sure the danger could be contained. I'm sorry, I've been talking on and on. It's been weighing on me. Let's not dwell on it. Tell me about you-know-who. I don't understand why he suddenly returned. The ministry seems as unprepared as ever. Loren spread his hands. It's complicated. I can tell you what I can, but you'll need to speak with Dumbledore for the full story. It started with the Crouches. A few minutes later, the group led by Moody moved out onto the Dursleys' perfectly trimmed lawn. Tonks reappeared with her hair now a bubblegum pink. Harry's spirits soared at the sight of his rescuers, but he kept himself from running into the circle and instead winked at Loren and Hermione. We'll talk on the way. Moody grumbled as he checked the sky, his magical eye ticking. Clear night. Might have been nice to have some cloud cover. We'll fly in tight formation, he ordered in a gruff, businesslike tone. Tonks will break the wind. Lupin watches the ground. The rest stay behind. Do not break formation for any reason. If any of us fall, we'll come back for the bodies when the mission's over. If we're all killed, you fly east. Someone will meet you. His words cast a shadow, everyone taking the risk seriously. Tonks, however, cheerfully strapped Harry's empty trunk and Hedwig's cage to her broom. If Loren could have read her mind then, he'd have heard a little humming. I thought this was going to be a boring delivery. It's actually fun. Once everything was ready, Tonks and Harry, hidden under a disillusionment charm, mounted their brooms and rose first, circling in the night, waiting for Loren and Hermione. Hermione raised her hand and whispered, Loren? We don't have brooms. 528, 12 Grimmauld Place. The night was thick and cold. The full moon hung high, turning the world silver and brittle. Hermione's head, bowed against Loren's neck, lifted a little. Her eyes narrowed against the glare. Below them, the world opened up into a spread of cold light. Loren had taken the form of a hippogriff. Hermione's hands were locked tightly around his scaled neck, feeling the cool smoothness under her palms. The wind tugged at her hair. Through the gaps in his feathers, she could catch the faint orange scent she had begun to associate with him, and a warmth that eased the chill in her chest. They were high enough that the neat, square gardens of Privet Drive had shrunk to pattern, a scatter of dark green and black, two tiny points that might have been Uncle Vernon's headlights. Loren's idea had been simple and clever. Disillusionment charms to mask them, then transform and fly. No one except Mad-Eye noticed anything amiss. The others assumed they'd simply stowed their brooms away like enchanted luggage. Tonks led the way. Moody watched from the rear. Lupin hovered close on the edge of commands. Hermione pressed her cheek back against Loren's neck and let the night wind rush past. Quick, left, left! There's a muggle looking up! Moody's voice came ragged through the gusts. Tonks yanked her broom, veering hard, and the rest followed. We need to climb. A quarter-mile higher, came Moody's next order. They rose again until the ground was awash of pinpricks, streetlights, distant headlights. The cold bit deeper at that height. Robes billowed, and the straps on Tonks's birdcage creaked. Harry's laughter floated up from somewhere in the group, bright and unexpectedly hearty, like someone letting go of a month's worth of worry. South, town ahead, southeast, Moody barked. They angled to avoid clusters of light. For the next hour, Moody changed course constantly. To Hermione, it felt like they were circling. Keep climbing. Low cloud ahead. We can hide in it, he shouted. Don't fly into the clouds. We'll get soaked, Mad-Eye. Tonks snapped, annoyed. Moody fell quiet for a heartbeat, then returned to barking directions. Turn southwest. Avoid the highway. Double back a bit. Make sure we're not followed. We're practically frozen on these brooms, Tonks cried. If you keep making us circle like this, we'll get there next week. We're almost there. It's time to start descending, Lupin said, his voice thin with fatigue. Harry, Loren, Hermione, stick close to Tonks. Tonks whooped. Hermione saw her fling a quick kiss toward Lupin as they dropped together toward a pale, spreading pool of light. The group arcs down, lights resolving into streets. Car headlights, street lamps, chimneys, and TV aerials, and between them, black squares, houses. We're here! They landed on a patch of unruly grass beside a small square. The hippogriff shrank beneath her until Loren stood, only a little taller than Hermione, steady and warm. He felt the imprint of her hands on his back and said in a teasing voice that only she could hear, Going to cling on forever? Embarrassed, Hermione let go and smoothed her clothes, pressing a hand to her flushed face. Thank goodness the disillusionment charm still held. Moody limped forward, peering at house numbers with the dogged attention of someone who had done this many times. The houses around them looked forlorn, broken windows catching the streetlight, peeling paint, bags of rubbish piled on steps. He pulled a scrap of parchment from his cloak and thrust it at Harry. "Read this and remember it." Harry took the paper. The handwriting was long and thin. The Order of the Phoenix headquarters is located at Grimmauld Place, number 12, London. Before anyone could study it more, the parchment shriveled and burned and fluttered into ash. They looked up at the row of houses. They were standing in front of number 11. At the left was number 10. Then, the next house slid into place, and it became number 13. Between numbers 11 and 13, space rippled. A door and a narrow house materialized out of nothing, pushing the adjoining walls aside as if an extra building had been conjured between them. Loren felt the strange, powerful magic like ripples underfoot. He had never seen the Fidelius charm unfold like this, but he had the sense it worked on a different level from ordinary concealments. The disillusionment charm hid by matching colors and shapes. The Fidelius charm folded and compressed the space itself, and altered perception so that those who knew of the place simply couldn't reveal it unless the secret keeper allowed it. He tried to say, "Grimmauld Place, number 12" aloud, and found the words blur and fail on his tongue. That was the charm's most alarming property. Even knowledge could be blocked from articulation. Moody grunted as if he had expected their astonishment and pushed open the gate. "Come on, we've wasted enough time. There's a meeting." The black paint on the door flaked, and the silver knocker was a coiled serpent. There was no keyhole, no letterbox. Lupin tapped the wood with his wand. From within came the clank of chains and a long, protesting creak as the door slowly opened. Harry's memory came back into place then. He smiled and warned, "Don't go too far in. Don't touch anything. Don't make a noise." He understood whatever protections and quirks the house might have. They stepped into a dim, narrow hallway that smelled of damp and old wood. It could have been an abandoned house, except that one by one a row of gas lamps guttered to life along the wall. A chandelier with a serpent motif threw a faint, tremulous light that steadied and revealed the long gloom. Peeling wallpaper, threadbare carpet, and portraits hung askew and graying with age, faces of the Black family watching from their frames. Molly Weasley appeared from deeper in the hall, moving quickly, her face bright despite the tired hollows under her eyes. "Oh, Harry, Loren, Hermione, so good to see you!" She enfolded Harry in a quick hug. She looked thinner than before. "You must be starving after your journey. Have some food later, but the meeting's just about to start. Someone's already arrived with a report, so hurry along." She let Moody shepherd the others toward the meeting, but held the three of them back. "No, children. Only members of the Order at the meeting. Ginny and her brothers are upstairs. Go wait with them, and we'll have dinner afterward." Harry, calm now that they were back in this familiar but strange place, pressed a finger to his lips and gestured them to follow quietly. They padded past moth-eaten curtains and a terrible umbrella stand that looked like a troll's leg and up the dark stair. On the wall beside them hung a row of withered house elf heads, house elf memorials, grotesque and small. They turned right on the second floor and pushed open the second door. Inside, the red-haired cluster of Weasley siblings looked up and their faces lit with delighted surprise as they recognized them. "Harry!" Ginny practically threw herself at him, nearly knocking him backwards. "Oh, did you see him? He's really here. We didn't hear you come in. Are you all right? How have you been? We wanted to write and tell you everything that's happened this month, but Percy said someone was watching owls going in and out of the burrow, so our letters had to be rubbish. We couldn't say anything. Dumbledore even made us swear not to speak about it." Harry hugged Ginny, stroking her red hair. Loren and Hermione exchanged a knowing smile. George and Fred were sitting on one of the single beds behind them, leaning against the pillows and idly fiddling with a long, flesh-colored cord attached to a small ear-shaped object. Oil lamps cast a dim light across the peeling plaster. Both twins wore the kind of mischievous grins that always followed teasing intimacy. "Give him a moment to breathe, Ginny," one of them said. Ron passed by, quietly closing the door, then sighed with relief. Finally, Loren, Hermione, I haven't missed you this much this summer. He'd shot up a few inches in the past month and was lankier and slightly awkward, but the long nose, the red hair, and freckles were unmistakable. Hey, Loren, Hermione, the twins chorused. Long time, Loren and Hermione replied, and drifted over toward the twins, leaving Harry and Ginny alone. Why are you lot so cheerful? Hear anything interesting while we were away? We did, George said, shaking the flesh-colored string so the ear twitched. But we didn't hear everything clearly. Tell us what you know, Hermione urged as the twins settled on the bed opposite them. Loren's eyes wandered around the room as he listened. The space was tall and mostly bare. High ceiling, clean walls, an ornate frame holding a blank, slightly musty canvas. 2 single beds, a few stools. There was a hollow, neglected feel to it. Where do I start? George considered. First, about the Order of the Phoenix. Fred pulled the ear along the cord and sighed. He gave a quick summary of what Loren already knew. The Order had originally been founded by Dumbledore in the 70s to fight Voldemort, had disbanded after the First War, and been reassembled this summer by Dumbledore. Who's in it? Hermione asked, eyes bright. We've only seen about 20 people, maybe more, Fred said. I found some old pictures at Dad's. There were people from the papers back then. Bill managed to dig up old newspapers from Gringotts. Fred named the fallen, Fabian and Gideon Pruitt murdered by 6 Death Eaters led by Antonin Dolohov, Caradoc Dearborn gone missing, the Bones family captured, Benji Fenwick killed, Marlene McKinnon. George added, the Longbottoms count too, though Neville recovered. That was in the news. Hermione glanced at Loren with a small nod. Those are the dead ones. What about the people who are active now? What are they doing? What's you-know-who planning, and how does Dumbledore intend to stop him? George rolled his eyes and toyed with the ear. Mum's done everything to stop us learning the inside story. The Order doesn't let us go to meetings. We don't have specifics, only bits and pieces. Ron returned from the door with Harry and Ginny, who were blushing. They pulled up stools and filled in what they knew. Some of the Order are tailing Death Eaters whose identities are known, keeping watch on them, Ron said slowly. Percy's in charge of that. Fudge wanted to make Percy the minister's assistant to spy on us, but Percy refused, so someone called Bertha Jorkins got the job instead. Hermione looked from Ron to Loren. They're recruiting too, Ron went on. Bill's been doing recruitment. He's been trying with Fleur. Loren caught Ron's expression and let out a short laugh. The boy was clearly smitten. Fleur Delacour? Harry repeated. Ginny snorted. She's taken a job at Gringotts to improve her English. Bill's been tutoring her. Charlie's joined as well, though he's still in Romania, Fred said. Dumbledore's asked him to recruit foreign wizards. He's been meeting a lot of people between jobs. Some are on guard duty all the time, George added. Is it to protect me? Harry asked, surprised. Ron shook his head. Mrs. Fig was always watching over you. Lately, more wizards have been taking shifts. It came from a new member's information. Someone in the ministry wanted to do something about you. You know, Voldemort still can't find the Dursleys. But Mum got furious when she heard that part, George said. She found our little invention and nearly threw us out. Good thing we'd already learned apparition, or we'd have been caught. Fred showed them the ear on its cord. Extendable ears, our latest. We had to hide them so Mum wouldn't throw them away or burn them. Loren took the device, turning it over in his hand. Its design was clever and simple. 2 ear-shaped receivers that could transmit sound between them over a distance, like a prototype wired telephone that needed no electricity. Anything else? He asked. No more, Ginny said, throwing up her hands. We've been cleaning this house. It's been empty for years and things bred in here. We've done the kitchen and most bedrooms. Tomorrow we'll do the living room. We know they're holding important meetings. Professor Snape was here the other day. But we can only sit here and listen, Ron muttered, punching the headboard so hard he winced. Mum's put countercharms on almost every important door. The extendable ears can't slip under a door at all. I don't know what she thinks we'll learn. Her potato-peeling magic? I'd like to know what Snape's up to, Harry said. The twins huffed. He's reading some top-secret report, apparently. Half an hour later, Molly knocked on the bedroom door. Meeting's over. Come downstairs for dinner. Lots of people want to see you, especially you, Harry. They gathered at the rail and looked down into the dimly lit hall. It was packed below, wizards crowding toward the main door, whispering. Professor Snape moved among them, his hair slick and shining. Loren stuck his head over the railing. Snape looked up, and their eyes met for a moment. Loren saw a tired, hard clarity beneath the professor's usual cool expression, like a man who had gone without sleep but whose mind remained razor-sharp. The stare ended abruptly when Tonks cried out, "Sorry, this blasted umbrella stand, it tripped me again." Harry flinched and shouted, "Cover your ears." Loren quickly covered Hermione's. Before anyone else could react, a shrill voice filled the house. "Beasts, harlots, filthy, evil spawn, bastards, freaks, ugly wretches, get out of here! How dare you defile my ancestors' home?" Two moth-eaten velvet curtains at the front of the hall flew open, revealing a life-size portrait of an old woman in a black hat, shrieking. She drooled, her eyes darted, and her yellowed face was pulled taut. Lupin hurried over in 3 long strides to pull the curtains closed, but the portrait kept screaming. Sirius came bursting through a door and helped, yanking the curtains with him. "Shut up, you horrible old hag! Shut up! You prodigal son, a disgrace to the family, the spawn I thrust into the world. I said, shut up!" At last, the curtains covered the painting, and the screaming faded, leaving a thick silence. Hermione shivered. Loren turned his head toward the main door. The crowd had gone, and Snape had left. Only Lupin and Tonks lingered by the doorway, adding magical locks and bolts. "That's Sirius's mother," someone explained. "We tried to take her portrait down years ago, but there's a permanent sticking charm behind it." Harry led the way downstairs, relieved. "You don't know yet, do you? This is the Black family house. Sirius's family. He's the last of the line, so the house is ours to use now." "So he lent it to Dumbledore for headquarters," Molly murmured, leaning on the banister. "He was supposed to get married here, had plans, but I suppose that's on hold now." "Is the bride here?" Harry asked eagerly. "How could she stay in a place like this?" Sirius said they'd postpone the wedding until after all this. They passed a row of dried house elf heads nailed to the wall. Hermione scrunched her nose. "Can't these be taken down?" "The adults are too busy. We haven't cleaned this wall yet," Ginny said. Loren's brow twitched and he fell silent. A memory that should never have been his surfaced slowly, odd and half-formed, a scrap of knowledge about another Black. Regulus Black, a Death Eater, and about a Horcrux Voldemort had made before his fall, Slytherin's locket. In the version he knew, the locket had passed through many hands, and then, somewhere in this old house, it had ended up in the keeping of an old, mad house elf. "Is there a house elf living here?" Loren asked softly. "Just one," Ron said. "Creature. He's kept to the house for years, mad as anything. He'd love to cut his own head off and stick it on the wall like the others. He's bound to make trouble when we start cleaning." "I see," Loren said, thoughtful. They descended a stone staircase into the kitchen below, which was darker and rawer than the hall. It was a deep, cavernous room of rough stone. Most of the light came from a wide fireplace at the far end. Smoke and pipe tobacco hung in the air like battlefield haze. Heavy iron pots and pans loomed from the soot-streaked ceiling, monstrous in the dim light. Because of the meeting, many chairs had been set out, and a long wooden table crowded the middle of the room. Scattered across it were parchment rolls, stemmed glasses, and empty wine bottles, and a pile of cloth rags. Arthur and Bill sat together at the end of the table, their heads close, whispering into one another. They're still tight-lipped. I can't tell if they actually believe he's back. They probably don't want to take sides or get involved. Bill Weasley, still with his long ponytail, held an unrolled parchment, head tilted as he quietly filled Arthur in. Despite the flamboyant clothes, there was a new steadiness about him. "That's possible," Arthur said, pushing up his horn-rimmed glasses so they caught the light. "I don't think they'd ever side with you-know-who. They lost a lot before. Do you remember that goblin family he killed near Nottingham last time?" "That's not certain, Bill. It depends on the price," Bill replied. "Not just gold. If someone offered them the kind of freedom we've denied them for centuries, who knows? They'd be tempted. By the way, any progress with Gugor?" "He's pretty put off by wizards right now," Arthur said. "He's furious about that bagman business. He thinks the ministry covered it up, They never got their gold from him. Loren and the others listened, eyes thoughtful. Ludo Bagman's debts still hung over things, it seemed. The conversation was about the Order's attempt to court the goblins. So far, the goblins appeared to be waiting, perhaps for a better offer. Long peace had dulled the memory of Voldemort's ideology for some, and to goblins and other non-human beings, the prospect of siding with pure-blood supremacists for short-term gain was complicated. Ahem. Molly's voice cut through the low murmur. Harry's here, and Loren and Hermione too. Bill and Arthur snapped out of it. Bill hurriedly stuffed a few parchments back on the table, while Arthur turned and smiled awkwardly. Oh, Harry. Long time no see. Mad-Eye didn't make you detour to Greenland on the way back, did he? He wanted to. How was your meeting? What was Snape saying? Oh, Dad, when's dinner? I'm starving. A cluster of restless younger Weasleys surged forward, looking for gossip and glancing greedily at the parchment. The scrolls were dense with handwriting and reports, so the little ones drifted instead toward the drawings and diagrams. Loren scanned them too. A quick eye could pick up only fragments. Walton McNair has been loitering outside the Department of Mysteries, suspected of probing for Lucius Malfoy is in close contact with multiple wizarding families. Unidentified wizards seen in the Azkaban Sea area. Bill had only 2 hands and a dozen reports spread across the table. He managed to put away a few, but a stack of architectural drawings remained in plain sight. Hermione's face brightened when she found a report about giants. She squeezed Loren's hand without thinking. Hagrid and Madame Maxime have arrived, she whispered. They presented gifts and are negotiating with Gugor. Bill went pale at her whisper. He snatched his wand and made every scrap of parchment vanish. The children fell back, reluctantly losing their focus, and sat down in a line. I heard someone saying they were starving, Molly said, fingers clenching as protective instincts flared. She forced a smile. Sit down for a bit, children. Dinner'll be ready soon. I'll help, Arthur said, easing the tension with his usual placating smile. Under his direction, knives began to cut and chop themselves, plates and goblets floated from the old cupboard, and Molly stirred a great cauldron that hovered over the fire. The smell of cooking began to fill the long kitchen. The Weasley twins, who had been the loudest, fell silent by tacit agreement. They tidied the messy table, careful not to rile their mother. Ron and Ginny followed, obediently taking out plates and food. At the far end of the table, Loren and Hermione, outsiders for all intents, pressed their lips together. He had a faint smile at one corner of his mouth. She had amusement shining in her eyes. They tried hard not to laugh. My dear friends, welcome to the Order of the Phoenix headquarters, Bill said. I know how hard your curiosity is, he added with a shake of his head. I felt the same during the First War. Mum and Dad kept me at home with the little ones. Which little one? George complained. Ourselves. We could take care of ourselves, George protested. I can't remember. Maybe Percy. Bill threw the absent brother under the bus with a casual pout. It's not that we're deliberately hiding things, Bill continued, but Dumbledore specifically told us to keep some things from you, especially you, Harry. Harry's face went a little pale. So I'm being singled out, Ron blurted, needlessly sharpening the moment. Bill covered his mouth with his fist to hide a smile. By the way, you've met Mundungus, haven't you? Who's calling my name? Mundungus grumbled and shifted under his filthy bundle of rags. A dirty hand poked out, and after a moment, another hand produced a grimy black pipe. He lit it with a wand, inhaled, and exhaled a cloud of foul green smoke. The smell was like burning old socks. I'm telling you one last time, Mundungus, don't smoke that in the kitchen, especially when we're about to eat. Molly shouted from the stove. All right, sorry, Molly. He snuffed the pipe and stuffed it into a pocket, head bowed. Harry, you all right? Mundungus asked, bleary-eyed, then began to fumble apologetically. I should have stayed away, but those cauldrons wouldn't have fetched a good price if I hadn't got rid of them. The older Order members arrived then. Sirius led, tired and grim, with Remus and Tonks behind him. They looked like they had just seen something unpleasant. It's good to see you, Loren, Hermione, and Harry. Sirius took a seat, older and more drawn than usual. When he said Harry's name, his face warmed into a tired smile. Thanks for the Dementor and the trace, Loren. If not for you, things could have been worse. The room chilled as if a small shadow had passed. Mundungus faltered mid-speech. Tonks stilled, and even the stew stopped bubbling for a heartbeat. Harry's mouth went tight. I asked Ron and the others about things, but they said we weren't allowed in the order. So, they're right. You're too young. Molly snapped from beside the cauldron, apron on, fists clenched, glaring at Sirius as if he'd personally endangered her son. Sirius raised his eyebrows. Since when do you have to be in the order to ask questions? Harry's been stuck in that muggle house for a month. He has a right to know what's going on. George's eyes widened. Wait, why does Harry get answers? For a month we've been trying to get something out of you lot, Fred said, but you wouldn't tell us. No one told you because you're not supposed to know, Sirius said calmly. That's your parents' decision. Harry is different. You don't get to decide what's good for Harry, Molly snapped. You remember what Dumbledore said, don't you? Which part? Sirius asked. That he shouldn't be told what he doesn't need to know. I only meant to tell Harry what he needs to know, Molly. He's not one of us. He's only 15. The Weasley brothers watched the exchange like a tennis match, heads swiveling between the two. Ginny, holding a butterbeer cork, stared, startled. Lupin watched Sirius without blinking. Tonks watched Molly. Hermione listened to the rising, falling argument and felt a small, absurd bubble of unreality. They had flown from London for hours, and the appetizer to dinner was a domestic row. It looks like there's still some time before dinner, Loren said quietly, his calm voice cutting through the noise like a window opening. Hermione's scattered thoughts steadied. She had remembered something from when she accepted Sirius's wedding invitation. While everyone's attention was on the argument, Loren and Hermione slipped away from the end of the table, melting into the dim light, and headed up the stairs toward the hall. 531. A fairly peaceful dinner. Walking down the stairs of Grimmauld Place toward the underground kitchen, the rich smell of stew lightened Hermione's step. She kept stealing glances at the locket resting against Loren's chest. One look, then another. Keep rolling your eyes and they'll fall right out, Miss Granger, Loren said. He gently turned her face forward. It's not that I'm hiding it, he added. It's just, there isn't time. They're still waiting for us downstairs. I'm not Professor Moody. How would my eyeballs fall out? Hermione muttered, but Loren wasn't finished with his teasing. If your eyeballs do fall out like his, I'll get you a prosthetic and call you Magic Eye Granger. He pinched her soft cheek. Hermione yelped and slapped his hand away, shooting him a dangerous look. He quickly looked ahead and grew serious. I hope Molly and the others have stopped arguing. We should keep Kreacher and the Horcrux to ourselves for now and decide whether to tell them after we've seen Dumbledore. What do you think? A clumsy change of subject, Hermione said, probing the sore spot with her tongue, but not pressing the issue. They moved down the dim stone steps into the kitchen, the fireplace and stove throwing warm light, steam and a faint smell of burning match mingling with the stew's aroma. The long table argument and the cooking row had reached a peak. Even though he's only 15, he's been through more than most of us in the order, more than some of us who've been at it longer, Sirius said, low and fierce, the veins in his neck standing out. No one denies what he's done, Molly shot back, stirring the pot so hard the spoon trembled in her hand. But he isn't a child anymore, someone said. But he isn't an adult either, Molly snapped, tapping the pot with the ladle. Don't treat him like James, Sirius. Thanks, I get who he is, Molly, Sirius cut in. Arthur didn't answer right away. He took off his glasses and wiped them on his robes before speaking calmly, not meeting his wife's eyes. Dumbledore knows the situation has changed. He agrees Harry should be told to a point. Harry's living here now. That doesn't mean we should encourage him to pry, Molly objected. I think it's best Harry hears the truth from us, Remus said quietly. Not every detail, but enough to prevent dangerous rumors. May I say something? Tonks raised a timid hand. I think we should let Harry have a say in this. The red-headed children at the table all brightened. If Harry was going to be told, that meant they would be told too. Mundungus, trying to shrink into his chair, looked around as if he ought to speak, but clammed up under Molly's glare. All right, Molly said finally, taking a breath. Her lower lip trembled. I suppose my opinion will be overruled. I just want to say one thing. Dumbledore has his reasons for not wanting Harry to know everything. And besides, before she could finish, Fred and George launched themselves toward the stove as if at a call. Bread's ready? Let's eat. They used magic to levitate a large pot of stew, a kettle of butterbeer, a cutting board piled with bread, and a heavy knife, all toward the table at once. The stew pot skidded across the surface and stopped just at the edge, leaving a long, charred black streak. The butterbeer kettle nearly tipped when it landed, but Bill steadied it. The bread knife slipped from its board and stuck its tip into the table, quivering. A bit of an accident, one twin said with a grim chuckle, but a safe landing. They glanced at their mother. Molly's face shifted from the sharp, anxious look to something softer. Her eyes swept across Ron and Ginny, then fell on Hermione and Loren. Her shoulders sagged and the firmness left her voice. Let's eat first. The children brightened at once. For the first minutes of the meal there was little spoken, just the scrape of cutlery, the clatter of plates, Ron's loud chewing and Mundungus's slurps. Tonks kept Ginny entertained by shape-shifting small features as she ate. One moment her nose would balloon into a hooked beak, then shrink back to a button with errant nose hairs poking out. The kids collapsed into giggles. Molly, composure restored enough to steer the conversation, put down her glass of butterbeer and looked at Harry. All right, Harry, what do you want to know? The laughter died. Even the clinking forks softened. Harry hesitated, then asked in a small, steady voice, where is Voldemort now? What is he doing? I've been trying to follow Muggle news. There's nothing. No mysterious deaths. Nothing happening. That's because for now, everything seems quiet, Sirius said, cutting his steak without looking up. No sudden deaths. No Death Eaters causing trouble. Azkaban holds. It seems he doesn't want to draw attention. Dumbledore was stripped of his international positions after repeatedly saying Voldemort had returned, Arthur added. The Ministry pushed back hard. Around Grimmauld Place number 12, Harry and his godfather exchanged what little news existed since the summer. There wasn't much. Voldemort and his followers were keeping themselves hidden. The Ministry was bungling everything, and the Order could only wait and prepare. Any deeper intelligence rested with Dumbledore, and Snape perhaps. Loren listened, idly breaking off buttered bread and tossing it to a ginger cat under the table that was batting at a butterbeer cork. Crookshanks looked up, gave him a disdainful blink, nudged the bread aside, and brought a fried fish fillet from his bowl, placing it at Loren's feet with an imperious pat on his ankle. The house was large enough for many bedrooms, but only a few beds were properly made. Apart from Arthur and Molly, the adults each had their own rooms and beds. The children bunked in pairs, George and Fred together, the girls together, Hermione and Ginny, and the boys in whatever arrangement suited them. Harry and Ron had hoped to squeeze in with Loren, but Loren insisted on a room of his own. I'll manage, he told Molly as she fussed. You should get some rest. You've been busy all day. It's nothing, Molly said, glancing down the corridor, but I'll be going to their rooms later to tell them to sleep. If they sneak up staying awake to have meetings, I'll know. They always do. She sounded half joking, half weary. If I don't catch them, I'll be a flobberworm. Loren smiled faintly at the memory of the Weasley children's secretive nudges. He knew they'd try to hold their own meeting that night. He had one he wanted too, an academic one, with Hermione. They still needed proper time to examine the locket they'd recovered, to see what Slytherin's locket actually looked like, and whether any unusual magic clung to it. It's normal for friends to talk after not seeing each other all month, he said, lowering his voice. Molly smoothed the last corner of a quilt and raised an eyebrow. Didn't I say they could catch up at the table? Won't they have time later? You're right, Loren hesitated, then added carefully, but confining them completely won't help. Letting them move about gives them a chance to learn how to protect themselves. I know that, Molly said, stopping her fussing. She looked away so he couldn't see how her eyes reddened. But I can't stop worrying. I have nightmares, of you dying. Since the Triwizard night, I haven't slept properly. I dream of bodies on a cold floor, broken limbs, blood. Her voice broke. It won't happen, Loren said, but his comfort sounded thin even to his own ears. He didn't know how to promise safety he couldn't guarantee. Just don't let them get reckless. I'll remind Hermione to look after Ginny. Molly brightened at that. She clapped her hands, stood, and headed for the door. I'll go check on them. Good night, Loren. Good night, Molly. He closed the bedroom door gently behind her and paused, listening. The old house always carried a faint, stubborn smell of damp and decay. The oil lamps and gas lights were dim and made the rooms seem darker, more hollow. Loren stood staring at the blank patch of wall where a faded family portrait had once hung. Years of neglect had drained the paint and magic from the canvas. The portrait no longer spoke or moved. Only faint outlines remained, as if someone invisible still breathed in the frame. He thumbed the edge of the frame, and it swung forward with a soft tap against the wall. Hermione probably won't come up until Ginny falls asleep, he murmured. He reached up and took the locket from his chest. It was an ancient golden thing, chain of tiny linked metal rings, and an octagonal locket studded with small emeralds that still glinted despite the years. In the center sat an egg-sized circular boss, cleaved left and right by a snake-shaped S, forming two small windows that hinted at something hidden within. Loren finished the last stroke. The rune closed on itself like a coiled Ouroboros. The parchment before him was a mess of similar symbols, complex strokes, hooked and twisted, each drawn in heavy black ink with blue edges bleeding into the paper. A faint, clean scent of vegetation rose from the page. The runes were oddly beautiful. He had copied 17 of them from the locket, could identify 13, and had only traced the remaining 4. He'd tried outlining those with unicorn hair several times, but the results were inconclusive. The runes refused to reveal their reactions. Salazar Slytherin might have been the last person to use such ancient script. Even Flamel found them difficult. He said he'd seen them in a book about ancient magical ruins and had been poring over that book for information ever since. Destroying Horcruxes was simple enough. Gryffindor's sword, fiendfire, a basilisk fang. But as an alchemist, Loren wanted to understand what magic the locket actually held. Daisy Dodderidge, the woman who ran the leaky cauldron in the Time Rift, had mentioned Salazar Slytherin. She knew sealed histories and war prophecies. Maybe there were clues in the locket. Damn Voldemort and his ritualism for turning such things into Horcruxes. Hermione leaned over the desk to look at the locket. It doesn't look special at all, she said, thoughtful. That's odd. The sword of Gryffindor absorbs magic. Ravenclaw's diadem enhances wisdom. Slytherin wouldn't make something so ordinary. There must be something hidden inside. How do we open it, Loren? With Parseltongue. Loren replied easily. Hermione picked at the locket with her fingers. He noticed the casualness of it. If Creature hadn't kept it untouched for years, she wouldn't have been so breezy about poking it. Parseltongue fits Slytherin, she mused. The Chamber of Secrets was opened with it, and the basilisk was controlled with it. She flicked the chain. The rings chimed like a snake's tongue. Have you deciphered those runes? Do they say what's inside? Is it important? Deciphered. Loren glanced back at the sheet of charms. 13 known, 4 unknown. His head felt like a ledger of linear algebra problems. Let's say I have, hypothetically, he hedged. I'm not sure what's inside. If anything, it's not good. The locket seems to affect the wearer's emotions. Irritability, anger. No wonder Creature is always grumbling. Hermione pulled her hand away and hunched her shoulders, suddenly less composed. I hope Dumbledore gets back soon. Loren thought the house elf's condition began long before the locket. Years of warped instruction and being surrounded by odd, mad portraits would change anyone. The corridor outside began to fill with commotion, Molly's voice booming. George, Fred, don't think I don't know you're hiding on Harry and Ron's beds. I knocked on your door. Get back to your own rooms and sleep this instant. I've told you 100 times not to meddle in grown-up matters. There's a mountain of work tomorrow, and you're never about for the big cleanup, hiding with your joke toys. A ripple of magical displacement told them the twins had apparated away. The house settled back down. Hermione was about to say she'd copy the 4 runes separately and get some sleep when she rose, pressed her lips to his, then vanished with a soft pop. The sound of apparition, leaving only the amused expression in her eyes for the fraction of a second before she was gone. Dawn brought a pale, greenish-white light across the eastern sky, turning the night's blue to a gray canvas. The sun rose slowly, and the late summer day slid into being. A soft knock, then Molly's gentle voice. Wake up, Loren. If you want to sleep longer, there's breakfast in the kitchen. After you eat, come to the hall. Help us with the big cleanup. Okay, Mrs. Weasley, Loren answered automatically, opening his eyes to the mottled, oxidized ceiling. A shaft of sunlight picked out the parchment on his desk. The old, musty smell of the room seemed less sharp this morning, or perhaps he had grown used to it. He took a few seconds to clear the fog of sleep and remembered the dream. 4 impossibly long, thin snakes twisted into rune shapes, those 4 unknown runes, locking their tails in their mouths and writhing in endless loops. Bizarre. Nightmares, surely, until the smell of milk and porridge and the shuffle of slippers in the corridor pulled him fully awake. He washed and dressed, then went down to the kitchen. Hermione and Ginny were already at the table. Arthur was reading the paper, and Bill, Remus, and Sirius were there too. "How did you sleep?" Hermione asked, handing him cutlery and a cup. "Not great. Nightmares." He said it without thinking. Hermione's brow creased in a way that made him think she wondered if her goodnight kiss had disturbed him. Loren didn't elaborate. He noticed Tonks and Mundungus were absent. Toward the stove, he asked as casually as he could, "Mr. Weasley, is it just us living here?" "For now, yes." Arthur glanced up. "At first, only Remus and Sirius lived here. Later, our family moved in for convenience. Other people stay over when the situation demands it." "It's not just convenience," Remus said with a gentle smile. "Molly is being considerate. Sirius and I make a mess of the place, and she looks after us." He added, "What about Dumbledore? Will he be coming?" "People watch Dumbledore's movements closely," Arthur said. "To deal with the Ministry and malign Death Eaters, he mostly travels between Hogwarts and Godric's Hollow. Since this became the Order's HQ, he comes at least once a week to exchange information and give orders." Loren nodded and asked, "Has he been here this week? When will we see him?" "No need to rush," Arthur said. "He said he would come as soon as possible after you arrived." Molly bustled in with a pot of hot milk, the kitchen filling with its rich aroma. The wait for Dumbledore stretched longer than Loren expected. For days, Molly kept everyone busy with the cleanup. Harry grumbled that it felt less like tidy-up and more like a battle. The strange magical objects and pests put up a stubborn fight. Clearing the House of Pixies took nearly the whole morning. Pixies were insect-like creatures with a buzzing flight and tiny needle teeth, covered in thick black fur. When disturbed, they clenched their tiny fists, looking as if they might strike. Molly taught them to spray the pixies for 3 seconds to paralyze them long enough to toss them in a waste bucket. Loren suspected they were simply suffocated. There was no special venom in the spray. By noon, Molly removed her protective scarf and collapsed into an armchair. The curtains hung damp where they'd been sprayed, and a bucket full of unconscious pixies sat nearby with a bowl of their black eggs. Crookshanks nosed around while Fred and George eyed the eggs greedily. Pixie venom would go into the twins' skeving snack boxes. They'd heard of fainting fancies and nosebleed nougats, non-toxic, realistic effects, timed so Madame Pomfrey wouldn't catch on. That afternoon, they cleared a display cabinet. The objects there resisted coming out. Sirius was bitten by an enchanted silver snuff box. Ginny wound a music box, and it emitted an ominous tinkling that made people around it feel drowsy. She snapped the lid shut before anyone collapsed. Formal robes in the wardrobe tried to strangle anyone left alone with them. Old grandfather clocks fired screws at passersby. It was like pulling diseased tissue from the house, painful but necessary. No one knew if removing those things would help the place recover or invite worse trouble. Remus, once a Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, led the effort, though he vanished for days at a time on order missions. Meetings were rare. Members would pop in to whisper updates and then be gone. The portrait behind the hall curtain shrieked when the doorbell rang, and after enough of that, Fred and George swore they could face a banshee without raising an eyebrow. Snape made a few furtive visits, but Molly kept him at arm's length. They never met him face to face. McGonagall turned up a couple of times in muggle clothes and a coat, looking slightly out of place. On Tuesday, the house was calmer. The major cleanup was mostly finished, and, with term approaching, Molly let the children get back to schoolwork. Ron sat on the sofa with a Transfiguration textbook, focusing on Harry's essay tucked inside like a secret. Harry and Ginny huddled together. Ginny getting help with her homework. Loren fiddled with some small enchanted items, jotting notes in a notebook. Old household oddities were full of clever ideas. Hermione reviewed textbooks for the next year. At a tricky point, she asked, Loren, is it easier to understand the basic definition of the existence charm by classical magic principles or by modern ones? The book says both. This charm needs to be considered with the summoning charm, he said. There's no fundamental difference. The split is mostly in how you conceive existence. Harry and Ron looked up and exchanged a baffled glance. That's just words, Ron grumbled. I understand every word on its own, but together it makes no sense. Are we all in the same year? Hermione didn't look up. This is key material for next year. It's important for the OWL. Both boys went pale at the mention. Loren smiled to himself. Just then the doorbell tinkled downstairs. The little wizards instinctively covered their ears for the portrait's wail, near, but it wasn't a screech at all. Molly's warm voice carried up the stairs instead. Dumbledore, you're finally here. How long are you staying? Will you stay for dinner? They all froze, then in the next second rose as one, books and parchment abandoned, and hurried toward the hall. 533. Night Talk. Many miles away, in downtown London, a huge chimney rose like a lonely sentinel above an abandoned mill. There was no sound, but the dark river's slow sigh and no sign of life. The fog that had once rolled beneath the Prime Minister's window now drifted over a filthy, winding stream with overgrown banks and piles of rubbish. Along the river stood rows of old gatehouses, their nameplates caked in dust, but the letters still clear, Spinner's End. Footsteps echoed on the cobbles as Severus Snape paused before a house, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. In the wide hall, only a few lights glowed weakly. Otherwise, the place felt empty. Snape was used to this kind of gloom. His office as Dean of Slytherin at Hogwarts, where he had spent many years, had the same habitually low light and oppressive quiet. He rarely returned here. The excessively large house remained vacant and silent far more often than not. Perhaps that was why Lord Voldemort had abandoned the luxury of Malfoy Manor and chosen this place as a temporary residence. The house was silent everywhere. The creak of the front door startled the house elf, borrowed from the Malfoys and now tasked with the cleaning and laundry. Its misshapen face peered from the kitchen doorway. "Mr. Snape, have you eaten? Would you like something?" Snape glanced at the creature without warmth and shook his head. He understood why the little thing was so cautious. Since the Dark Lord had taken up residence here, the house had been steeped in intimidation. One house elf had already ended up as muck at the bottom of the river outside. To that Dark Lord, a lowly non-human was no different from an insect. Who would feel remorse for stepping on an ant? Certainly not Voldemort. Snape removed his coat with practiced ease, hung his robe on the stand in the hall, gave the trembling kitchen servant only a passing look, and walked upstairs. He stopped outside the study and knocked. "Severus, come in." The voice from within was low, lazy, edged with a pleased curiosity. Voldemort looked up from behind his desk. However many times one saw him, the grotesque serpent-like face, crimson eyes, flat nose with only 2 slits, was always terrifying. "Have you found his hiding place?" he asked. Snape suppressed the small, unpleasant sensations the sight provoked, inclined his head, and composed his features. "He is hidden by Dumbledore in a place I cannot disclose. I have other intelligence to report." The lamplight in the room was dim and yellow. Against it, the predatory crimson of Voldemort's eyes seemed to burn like a warning. "You said, someone at the Ministry sent Dementors after Harry Potter," Snape said. "It wasn't our doing. According to the Order's inquiry, Minister Fudge believes Dumbledore is conspiring to overthrow him, and that the boy who lived is Dumbledore's instrument." Voldemort's red eyes brightened. A satisfied sneer lifted his thin lips. Now the old headmaster tastes the fruit of his own indecision and timidity. "I heard the Ministry had considered him for minister, but he refused. When I was forced into hiding, he allowed Cornelius Fudge to rise." Snape nodded and let his gaze rest for a moment on the wand-making book on the desk. Barty Crouch was the original candidate, but he was implicated. "An excuse for the public," Voldemort snapped, contempt sharp in his voice. If Dumbledore had stood for him, Crouch's reputation could have been defended. But Dumbledore didn't like him. Too steely, too severe. Albus Dumbledore, forever seeing the big picture, decided the ministry needed a gentle hand and recommended the ineffectual Cornelius Fudge. Voldemort mocked him with a blend of scorn and a memory-sweet relish. Short-sighted, bloated, cowardly, and incompetent who doesn't know he's a fool. Better to raise such a man than to appoint someone truly capable. Snape felt a shadow cross his features. He remembered once being denied a position at Hogwarts. The interview had been conducted by Dumbledore. The memory left him slightly unsettled, but he kept silent. A flash of angry red passed through Voldemort's eyes. He snapped the book shut and tossed it onto the desk. Can we control this foolish minister? With him under our influence, everything would move more smoothly. Snape considered for a moment. As you said, Cornelius Fudge is arrogant and oblivious, hungry for influence but cowardly. If we revealed ourselves, he would likely run to Dumbledore for protection. Then forget it. Proceed as planned. Voldemort shrugged, dismissing the ministry matter. Have you questioned the Wandmaker? Snape kept his tone even. I spoke to Ollivander in Diagon Alley, in disguise. He says twin wands from the same core will not be inherently hostile to one another. If both wielders duel with absolute resolve, however, there's a chance of a strange, unpredictable effect. Voldemort's vertical pupils narrowed slowly. He showed no outward emotion. A fated coincidence, isn't it, Severus? That prophecy bound us to Harry, and now our wand's cores echo that destiny. Use a different wand next time you face Potter, Snape said, as if offering idle advice. A different wand would avoid the risk. Voldemort breathed out with the calm of certainty. Bellatrix has been tasked with that. She will travel. I expect news soon. Bellatrix. Snape's gaze tightened slightly. He noticed the wand-making book by Voldemort's hand and fought to keep his face impassive. Can she manage alone? Should we send others to assist? No. It's a trip to Germany to deal with an old man. Voldemort's voice closed off the subject. He shifted to another matter. How is your progress with the Horcruxes? Snape stored the mention of Germany and the old man away. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling light. His voice, for the first time, showed something of the eagerness beneath his restraint. I have rehearsed the process many times. I can begin whenever you command. Voldemort watched him, a thin, sinister smile curving his mouth. Remember, Severus, reading a book and the act itself are very different. You must split your soul with an unrepentant murder. Are you certain you can do it? Never doubted, Snape said shortly. Do not rush, Severus. We will begin soon, very soon. Late that night at number 12, Grimmauld Place, the dinner had wound down. Dumbledore had answered, as best he could, the many questions that had accumulated like restless children. The answers were not precise, but they had provided comfort. Harry and the Weasley children were happily led upstairs, Molly urging them to go to bed. The house's general relief left its occupants less guarded. No one noticed when Loren and Hermione slipped back from their shared bedroom to take seats at the long table in the basement for a private talk with the headmaster. Truly admirable. Dumbledore's voice broke a little as Regulus's story reached its end. He wiped his eyes. The candlelight was pale and weak, making it hard to tell whether he cried. After nearly 2 months apart, the headmaster remained recognizably himself. Silver hair and beard, deep blue eyes, a long nose that looked as if it had taken a few knocks, and a soft gray robe. He had the same patient presence, though Loren thought he looked a touch older. Loren drew a pendant from his chest and held it out. Headmaster Dumbledore, this is Slytherin's locket. They gathered around the small, ornate locket. A serpentine pattern worked with emeralds glittered in the flickering light, the inlaid scales catching and reflecting the flame as if the little snake might stir. Dumbledore examined it silently, then turned his gaze to the two sitting opposite him. They were nearly as tall as adults now. Though Dumbledore had seen many young wizards grow into adults over his long life, he still paused, a brief, fond daze in his eyes. Since Voldemort's return, tension had tightened everyone in the Order. Dumbledore, head of the Order, had not been idle. He had followed leads to places Tom Riddle had once inhabited, searching for traces of Horcruxes. Slytherin's locket had been a key target. How surprising, then, that it had come into his hands through Loren. I've taken rubbings of the runes, Loren said. 13 I can identify, 4 I can't. He pointed to the odd, unfamiliar characters. Dumbledore studied them, narrowing his pale eyes. These are ancient runes, abandoned for a reason. I've seen them on Egyptian pharaohs' sarcophagi. They're magic aimed at the soul. Can you translate them? Hermione asked, eager. No. Dumbledore's answer was plain. Hermione hesitated, then whispered, Should we open it here? Why not? Dumbledore smiled gently. With Loren Morgan and Hermione Granger keeping watch, there's no place I feel safer. Loren scowled inwardly. If it really depended on only them, it was hardly ideal, but he handed the locket forward. It opens with Parseltongue, Headmaster. You do it. Dumbledore lifted his wand and tapped the teacup on the table. The white porcelain trembled, and in a blink that was somehow both delicate and uncanny, it transformed into a coiled white snake that slithered toward the locket. Inside, something stirred with a rustling like a small animal, as if begging for mercy. The white snake flicked its tongue at the emerald scales and gave a muffled hiss. Open, it said. The locket's tiny metal catch clicked. Behind two small glass windows, two quick, alert eyes, black and white, appeared. A crystalline blue flash struck Loren's vision. He felt a pulse of magic ripple outward, swift and searching. He reached for his wand to counter, but the power withdrew without harming him or Hermione. The eyes rolled, and a voice, hissing and soft, came from the heart of the Horcrux. I see your heart. It is mine. I see your dreams, Albus Dumbledore, it went on. And I see your discontent. You will not be confined to little Godric's Hollow. You will not be bound by family ties all your life. Loren turned to watch Dumbledore, his wand already poised with the tip wreathed in fiendfire should anything happen. Hermione's fingers closed tight around her wand too, every healing spell and ward at the ready. But Dumbledore's face remained composed and his voice steady. Tom, are those your eyes? When were they placed here? You dare not remember that day. You dare not consider who cast the fatal spell. You made a mistake, and you will be trapped in guilt forevermore. You are afraid to move forward. Is this something you found in my memories? Dumbledore asked coolly, or did you pry them with Slytherin's magic to browse my mind? Either way, you did not see everything. I have recovered other Horcruxes. Your quest to conquer death is failing. Shut up! The locket's voice flared, suddenly agitated. The metal casing shimmered red. The little glass windows trembled as veins of crimson crawled around the eyes. A foul black mist hissed up like steam. From it, 3 grotesque bubbles bulged and broke free, their tops swelling into heads, then torsos and limbs, shaping slowly into 3 distinct human figures. The underground kitchen, long unused until recently cleaned, had a hearth that threw off only a faint glow and a trace of heat. Despite its age, the room was tidy, the light surprisingly bright. But on the long table in front of Loren and the others, a thick, inky black mist was seeping out, swallowing the light as it spread. From that mist, 3 figures slowly resolved, not like the flat, painted portraits, nor like translucent ghosts, but fully formed, flesh and blood in appearance. Every inch of their skin carried texture. They blinked and moved their eyes, alive and agile. Only tendrils of black smoke hovered around them. Otherwise, they could have been real people, unnaturally beautiful, almost too perfect. The figure on the right was uncannily like the headmaster. Silver hair and beard, but more robust, his nose straight instead of hooked, his bright blue eyes startlingly clear. He wore a coarse robe with a stained linen apron, his air less benevolent than Dumbledore's usual bearing. In the center stood a slight girl in a pale blue silk dress, hair like dry gold, her face weak and doll-like, but with startlingly lively, beseeching eyes. On the left was a skeletal, emaciated figure, a man reduced to frailty, hair thinning, mostly toothless, eyes clouded and hollowed. Loren recognized them before Hermione could speak. These were Horcrux-born images pulled from the depths of Dumbledore's memory. The identity of the 3 settled in his mind like a cold stone. It's been so many years since I last saw you, the gaunt man whispered. He smiled and lifted his head as if peering through countless layers of space. Albus, look at you, still handsome as when you were young. And look at me, so worn, so ugly that I can't bear to look at myself. No wonder you kept your gaze elsewhere. Though his tone pretended reunion, Loren and Hermione felt a chill under the words. They both drew back and glanced to Dumbledore for guidance. You are atoning, Gellert, for the blood on the tip of your wand, for the countless sins you committed. Dumbledore's deep blue eyes were fathomless. His voice was calm, each word deliberate. So you imprisoned me in Nurmengard, the gaunt man nodded gently, endured torment and humiliation, battened by wind and rain on the high tower, cold and hunger gnawing at every bone until they screamed. In the dark I would wonder, who allowed my young madness? Who spurred me on to pursue some higher cause without limit? Was it you, Albus? Dumbledore listened, eyes half closed. When he opened them again, there was no theatrical reaction, only the weary serenity of someone who had already made his peace. I think so, he said softly. Once I saw the truth, I tried to turn you back, but it was too late. I must atone. The gaunt man snorted softly. Did my death make you realize, brother? The girl in blue tilted her head, blinked with those moist, imploring eyes, and spoke like a wounded creature. Ariana wanted to go with you. You promised me to take me to the places you planned to go, the trips you never took after graduation, to give your clever speeches. Have you forgotten? Ariana was your first follower. Dumbledore's eyes reddened. His breath came uneven. His tall frame seemed to bow. The man who'd been so steady earlier now showed the strain of memories that stabbed at him. Loren and Hermione tried to draw as little attention to themselves as possible, but both worried for the headmaster. Hermione, piecing together what she could of the past, leaned forward and murmured, Professor, these are illusions. They're creations of the Horcrux. Dumbledore blinked, exhaled slowly. I know, he said, though his voice carried an edge of pain that suggested a deeper knowledge. Whether of the illusion itself or of what Ariana had accused him of, it was unclear. Loren's hand tightened on his wand. Dumbledore had been outwardly unmoved earlier when faced with the Grindelwald projection, yet now Ariana's image cut into him. The man on the right, the one with the vicious expression, oddly reminiscent of Dumbledore, spoke in a low voice. I have one thing to say. His bright blue eyes flashed with hatred, as if they might set everything before him aflame. That night I saw your spell hit Ariana. I saw it myself. No matter whose spell it was, I will bear it, Dumbledore said softly. I have thought that all along. Hypocrisy, the figure sneered. An excuse to this. He swayed within the black smoke, his eyes briefly glowing red. You hold the memory of that day. You could see it in your pensieve. Why not look? You know you killed your sister, killed the burden that weighed you down, silenced the fragile creature who held you back in Godric's Hollow. It was your spell that struck me, brother. It hurt me so. Ariana's voice turned hoarse and bitter. Her hair seemed to spin and flare, her gaze bored into Dumbledore. I saw it with my own eyes. It was you. That's why I never wanted to see you. Even at Christmas, I never sent you a card. Aberforth's voice thundered, and the three voices braided into something ugly and venomous, a banshee wail or the sibilant hiss of a snake. It tightened the chest and gripped the eardrums. Loren and Hermione felt the room turn colder as the black mist swelled. A dark, hungry aura sought to consume the headmaster, to use his magic to feed those remnants of souls, to give them strength. For an instant, a glint of watery crystal flashed in Dumbledore's eyes. Immediately after, a red flare burst out, and a pained roar issued from the heart of the mist. The three figures convulsed, their forms stretching and tearing under the blaze. They shredded into black smoke. With a sharp crack, the mist dissolved, and the locket clattered on the table. Its two tiny hinged windows hung open and useless. Only when the kitchen returned to its normal light did Hermione, who had been tense the entire time, finally exhale. She replayed their words in her head. Each accusation had sounded so clear that, combined with what she already suspected of the headmaster's past, she could assemble the outlines of the story. She looked at Dumbledore with concern. Professor, are you all right? I'm fine, he said, but his voice was tired. Slytherin's dark enchantment delayed me for a moment. What? Hermione's brow furrowed. Dumbledore opened the locket and examined it. The little glass eyes had been burned to ash. Salazar Slytherin once left a kind of magic in this locket. It seems he intended it as a test, perhaps to judge a successor. Whatever the purpose, the charm in this box can reach into the very depths of a soul. Loren watched him. Dumbledore didn't seem eager to dwell on what the three figures had said, so Loren changed tack. Hermione, puzzled, asked, We have spells that touch minds already. Imperious, Legilimency, Memory Charms, Occlumency. These only scratch the surface, Dumbledore said, turning the locket over to reveal the inner rim. The runes were scorched and the center bore a blackened mark, a thin crack through which a faint, flickering light still leaked. Memory or false memory charms can be undone by a powerful wizard. Imperius can be resisted with enough will. But Slytherin's enchantment goes deeper. Tom, when he created his Horcruxes, he did not understand how to use this fully. He could only use it crudely, to reflect fear and try to draw power from it. He traced the runes with a finger. This little window is a window into the human heart. It can peer into love, courage, wisdom, kindness, into dreams the person might not even know they had. In the wrong hands, it could be limitless. Like the Sorting Hat? Hermione asked. Far more potent. Dumbledore replied with a shake of his head and a rueful sigh. It's a great pity. Loren leaned over. The serpent pattern around the locket's face was dulled. The emeralds had long since lost their sheen. As he watched, the faint light in the crack dimmed further. Then, for a heartbeat, the serpent's eye, the emerald on the pattern, shimmered as if catching the candlelight. Loren's own shadow lay across the locket, so it couldn't have reflected anything. For an instant, he thought the snake winked at him. He glanced at Hermione and Dumbledore. Both were still intent on the locket, oblivious to whatever he had seen. Did you notice anything? Hermione asked, cocking her head. Loren hesitated, then shook his head. He bent his attention to the interior runes. The locket was small, and its engraving sparse. Many of the marks were lost runes, unreadable. A few were modern, making it impossible to reconstruct the locket's full creation. Perhaps with years of study, the meaning could be teased out. Professor, Loren said quietly, may I keep the damaged Horcrux? I'd like to study the runes. Dumbledore looked up and gave him a small, approving nod. Of course. On this broken piece, the runes are what matter. Loren's mouth curved. The locket is ruined. The diary was destroyed long ago. The remaining Horcruxes, should we destroy them now? Dumbledore smiled faintly, gentle but sad. You are impatient, child. Destroying the Horcruxes means destroying artifacts linked to the founders of this school. We must not be rash. It is not yet the final moment. Can we even be certain how many Horcruxes Lord Voldemort made? Hermione asked. Members of the Order and I are tracing every lead, but so far we only have fragments. Dumbledore's eyes grew distant, thinking of old friends and plans. There is much to do, and I suppose I still owe you that birthday present I've been postponing. The scene shifted. With doors and windows sealed tight, an old man with snow-white hair hung upside down in the air. His beard drooped toward his flushed face. His arms were bound tightly behind him. Along the wooden wall shelves, dozens of wands were lined up in neat rows. The prisoner, Gellert Grindelwald, knew his woods. Blackthorn for power and dueling, cedar for prescience, dogwood for trickery and escape. Yet now he feared the very wand he had once scorned most of all. Cypress, the wood said to deliver glorious deaths. Not far away, a woman moved, one with a slender, silver-white metal hand. She held a wand, finely crafted and chosen with care. Grindelwald recognized at once the work of a rival master. Damn Ollivander, he muttered inwardly, panic building. I don't have it. It was stolen years ago. It isn't with me, he cried out. Don't lie to me, Grindelwald, came the calm reply. I can give you my memories. You can see for yourself, he begged, the last of his bravado slipping away. The renowned wandmaker Grindelwald looked every inch the elderly scholar he was, sparse white hair, a permanent smell of tongue oil clinging to him. He hung upside down in midair, his back, hunched from years bent over his work, creaking under the strain. His cheeks were flushed. With the last of his strength, he forced his head up to look at the cruel British witch before him. Please, he croaked. I'll give you my memories. You'll understand if you just look. Bellatrix Lestrange sneered, covering her nose as if the old man's scent offended her. Grindelwald swayed in his bonds, sweat beading and trickling from his temples. The mingled scent of sweat and tongue oil made the world seem close and sour. Memories? I'll certainly take a good look, she said, then flicked her wand with a casual smile. Crucio. A red, malevolent light stabbed into Grindelwald. He convulsed. A scream tore itself from him and was strangled mid-sound as the curse spread through his body. His muscles clenched, sinews twisted, and every vein felt as though it were being driven with iron nails. Agony struck in waves as if someone were hammering at every bone and joint. He could only make hoarse, gurgling pleas. Spare me, please. I really don't have. After some time, an eternity measured in ragged breaths, the old man slumped, pupils cloudy and unfocused. His mouth hung open. Breath came in short, thin gasps and then faltered. Bellatrix stepped forward and seized him by the throat with a cold, metallic grip, her silver-ringed fingers tightening until he choked. A cruel smile twisted her lips. "Now," she murmured, "let me see your memories." Under her grip, Grindelwald's head tipped back, his eyes fixed, pupils dilating until they were like black wells, and he was pulled into the depths of recollection. The first memory unfolded in a dim attic corridor. Someone hurried along the passage, and Grindelwald, younger now, a robust craftsman with a lantern in hand, came in from the stair. He pushed open the door to his workshop and found it brightly lit, sawdust and gold dust scattered in the flickering glow. A blonde teenager sat on the windowsill like a bird, handsome in a louche, confident way. When the boy met Grindelwald's sharp look, his face lit up with mischief. Before Grindelwald could react, the youth shot a stupa from his wand and leapt from the window, laughter clear and ringing behind him. "Who was that thief, Grindelwald?" someone demanded. Grindelwald's face was lined with worry. "I don't know. I didn't know." A young man. Bellatrix's grip tightened and a shrill groan answered him in the present, drawn out and lingering, then vanished into the next memory. Grindelwald's clouded vision slid again, revealing another scene. Number 12, Grimmauld Place, the underground kitchen. Above the long table hovered a warm golden flame, its light spilling into every corner. It burned on its own, no fuel, no tending, suspended like a living thing. Hermione stood by the table, her eyes shining with the reflected fire. She whispered, awed, "Gubrathian fire, the eternal flame." Is this for my birthday?" Loren asked quietly, watching the golden light. His expression was filled with wonder. The flame was neither wild like fiend fire, nor faint like a bluebell flame. It had a steady, living quality, as if the magic within flowed in a continuous, measured circuit. "I'm very sorry, Loren. Your present is almost 2 weeks late." Dumbledore ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "It was difficult to transport. I did consider using owls, but the postmen all refused." Loren and Hermione ignored his flustered apology and leaned closer to the flame. Their breaths warmed it, and it swayed like a branch in a breeze. In Hermione's clear eyes, reflections of ideas sparked. If the bluebell flame were shaped that way, it might require less effort. When casting a flame charm, the wand's trajectory could be adjusted for a steadier burn. Loren watched the Gubrathian fire with a craftsman's interest, his mind already turning theoretical. If fiend fire were guided by a constructed magic cycle similar to this, it could burn hotter and longer. And the slow-acting defensive flame could be improved by emulating the Gubrathian pattern. Dumbledore smiled faintly at their eagerness. "Gubrathian fire isn't as rare as you imagine. It was once a common practical magic used by wizards for long-term illumination, replacing torches, lighting hearths, even placed in stoves. Many old homes and tombs still bear traces of it." Hermione frowned. "If it was so common, why did it become lost?" "Because the wizards who used it every day eventually suffered accidents," Dumbledore replied. "A curse?" Hermione asked. "Fires?" Loren's face grew serious as he explained. "Gubrathian fire never goes out. Over years and decades, negligence becomes inevitable. Once a careless moment starts a blaze, it's hard to stop. Its very persistence makes people relax their vigilance." Hermione considered that in silence. "It's gentle and stable, yes, but that consistency makes people complacent. By the time someone notices, the fire can already be unstoppable." Dumbledore nodded. "Still, you needn't use it for daily heating. Keep it contained, store it in a normal candlestick or a sealed lantern." Loren thought for a moment, forming plans in his head for containment, then looked up at Dumbledore. "You said in your letter you needed my help with something. What is it?" "I need you to help me visit Hagrid," Dumbledore said. "Hagrid, what's wrong with him?" Hermione's voice was urgent. With Lord Voldemort back and Death Eaters shadowing every corner, the old headmaster's words felt especially unsettling. The golden flames flickered twice at the sudden tension, then, calmed by their own magic, settled back into a steady glow, giving off soft light and warmth. Dumbledore still watched the fire with a faint smile. Calmly he said, "Don't worry, there's no immediate danger to his life. Our care of magical creatures professor has run into a little trouble on his way back to Hogwarts. What sort of trouble? Where did he go? Hermione pressed. Dumbledore considered aloud. He meant to bring a friend who finds travel inconvenient and has a peculiar appearance. He needs to avoid the locals, muggles, and other wizards, so he's been delayed. I need you to go and meet him. Relief flickered across Hermione's face, but then hardened. His friend isn't a dragon, thunderbird, or blast-ended scroot, is he? A 5x danger-level creature, something that could destroy a town if it got out of control? Rest assured, Dumbledore said, a little too brightly. I guarantee, speaking as headmaster, that his friend may be a bit tall, but he's like us. 2 hands, 2 feet, eyes, a nose, a mouth. No extra scales or wings, not randomly breathing fire, nothing horned and full of poison. Loren slipped the Gubrathian fire into a heat-resistant snake-bone container and fastened it around his neck, turning the pendant over in thought. By the timeline, Hagrid should be on a diplomatic mission to the Giants. If Loren remembered correctly, the friend in question would be Hagrid's half-brother, Grop, a pure-blood giant. The old headmaster's frankness made Loren bristle. He glanced at Dumbledore and asked, "Just tell me, is it a 5x level creature by the Ministry's rating?" Dumbledore twirled his beard awkwardly. Hermione's softened look sharpened again as she looked at him. A bit tall, but otherwise like us? Is it a giant? From your tone, it sounds like a pure-blood giant, dangerous, on par with an adult dragon. Dumbledore averted his eyes and muttered without conviction, "I'm not completely sure of the particulars. Ask Hagrid when you see him." Hermione's frown deepened. Where is he hiding now? At the foot of Ben Nevis. I don't know the exact spot. It was mid-August and a clear day. After breakfast, Hermione went upstairs and found Creature behind the curtains in the second-floor sitting room. Since the doxies had been cleared out, the old house elf had taken to lingering there, silent, staring into space. Sunlight gilded the white hairs in his ears and softened the lines of his hunched frame. "Creature," Hermione said softly, drawing near and opening her right hand to reveal the slightly charred locket. "The locket has been destroyed. Dumbledore did it. Regulus's wish has been fulfilled. We were in a hurry last night and didn't tell you." "Fulfilled," Creature repeated in a daze. Hermione felt no fondness for the blood-prejudiced Creature, but seeing him like this pulled at her. She hesitated, then added quietly, "I'm sorry I can't give you the locket back. Loren needs to keep it to study the runes." "The Dark Lord's thing. You can keep it if you want," Creature muttered. A long-held obsession that had kept him alive through years of solitude finally slipped away. His bony shoulders sagged. "Loren and I are leaving. We might go straight back to school for the start of term. You take care of yourself." Hermione watched as the old elf mumbled Regulus's name over and over, tears running down without his noticing. He lifted his head and stared up toward the Leo constellation, lips trembling. "Master Regulus, do you see it? Do you see?" She went down to the kitchen, where the room was crowded. People clustered near the fireplace, watching Sirius poke about the long-sealed hearth to see if it could still transport someone. Harry and Ron were fuming. "Didn't you say minors can't join the Order of the Phoenix? Why are they being sent on a mission?" they demanded at the nearest adults, indignation written across their faces. Loren shrugged and spread his hands. "Dumbledore's orders. I didn't want to go either." Harry and Ron bristled even more. Mundungus, hair in disarray and a pipe clamped between his teeth but unlit, muttered enviously, "Look at that, a fireplace the Ministry doesn't monitor. Big family perks, eh? No matter how poor you are, you're never that poor." George and Fred's eyes lit up. They sidled away from Molly's notice and hustled over. "You don't get it," they breathed. "A fireplace the Ministry doesn't watch is a secret transport route. Secret route means scarce goods. Scarce goods mean no taxes." Sirius, who had been tinkering by the hearth all morning, stretched, brushed coal dust from his trousers, and spat. "Still sturdy. The fireplace can be used. If you're heading to Ben Nevis, there's a shabby little pub in the wizarding village up there. The owner's a cousin of old Tom's from the Leaky Cauldron. Won't poke his nose in. Just get there and leave. The trip back's trickier. Try the night bus if you can." "We have a more convenient way to return," Loren said calmly. "Grimmauld Place isn't subject to the Ministry's apparition restrictions, so you can apparate back here. If you find Hagrid in time, you might even make it back for term. Molly hovered in an apron, hands full of plates. She came toward Loren and Hermione as if to hug them, then pulled back when she noticed the flour and grease on them. I don't know what Dumbledore's thinking, she fretted. Isn't there a single adult left in the Order? Why send you two on a mission? It's fine. We're not going after Death Eaters, Hermione said. If we're lucky, we'll be back in less than 2 days, Loren added. Molly packed pies and fried cutlets and fish into their pendants, fussing all the while. Remus had promised them ways to keep the food fresh, and Mrs. Weasley insisted on sending more than necessary. After hugs and last-minute admonitions, they said their goodbyes and stepped up to the fireplace. Flue powder sparkled, green flames leapt, and they stepped into the fire. Bang! Orange-red flames suddenly flared in the old fireplace, and a faint green tongue of fire licked the sooty bricks. Loren stepped out of the hearth with Hermione at his side, and they both looked around the tavern. Before them was a wide rectangular room. Rough mountain stone had been smoothed into 4 solid walls. The wooden ceiling showed no seams. The place was tidy, the tables were clean, and the small leather-upholstered seats gleamed. The leaky cauldron, this was not. A small door stood open nearby, revealing rows of wooden barrels and a rich smell of brewing. The bar ran opposite the fireplace, where a blonde girl about their age leaned on the counter, head bowed, nodding slightly. Loren and Hermione exchanged a puzzled look. Could this be Old Tom's cousin from the leaky cauldron? Sirius had never said his cousin looked so young, and there was no sign of magic about her. She didn't look or react like a witch or wizard. Loren crossed the room, his footsteps soft on the floor, and tapped the counter. The girl woke with a start, lifting her head in annoyance that quickly shifted to surprise when she saw them. "Are you here for drinks and lodging?" she asked, eyeing the soot on their shoulders. Her light green eyes widened with delight. "Are you wizards?" She wore a denim jacket and jeans, bright and energetic. "You are wizards," she muttered, certainty growing on her freckled face. "You came by fire. That's amazing. I've never seen real wizards before. Can you do magic? Do you have wands? Why aren't you wearing wizard hats?" Hermione blinked, taken aback. She couldn't understand why a muggle girl would be working in a wizard pub and know so much about the magical world. Loren glanced up at the neatly cut stone walls and the seamless ceiling, thinking. After the girl rattled off her questions and then abruptly stopped, Loren spoke quietly. "You guessed right. We are wizards. I'm Loren Morgan, and this is my friend. We were looking for the owner of this place. We have some questions. I'm Hermione Granger. Nice to meet you." The girl slapped her forehead. "Old Dodd? Oh, silly me. You're wizards. You came by fire. Of course you'd know him. But you're out of luck. Old Dodd's gone out." "You know Old Dodd?" Hermione asked. "He might just be down the road getting food and smoked meat, or he could have gone to the next town for brewing supplies," the girl said, checking the clock on the wall. "If he's quick, he'll be back before lunch. If not, maybe before dinner." Loren and Hermione both frowned. They'd planned to ask local wizards about conditions on the mountain, or whether anyone had seen anything unusual, any trace of Hagrid if they were lucky. With Old Dodd gone, that was harder. "Are you in a rush? Do you have to leave today?" the girl asked, seeming to understand their dilemma. "If you're not, why not stay the night? We do lodging, 3 meals a day. The rooms are upstairs and very clean." Hermione glanced toward the door. The mountain range outside was swallowed in cloud. Leave now and risk wandering the slopes blind, or stay and gather themselves. "Get us a room," she decided. "How do you take payment? Galleons or pounds?" Loren asked. "Galleons." The girl blinked, confused, then shrugged. "Pounds, then. How long do you want it for?" They paid quickly. The girl led them upstairs, opened the first door on the landing, and revealed a room with a double bed. "Here's the key. If you want hot water, just call me." She stopped, slapped her forehead again. "Oh, I forgot my name. I'm Alice, Old Dodd's neighbor and friend. He's out, so I'm minding the place. If you get bored, come down and chat. I know a fair bit about the mountain." "We'll come down after we put our things away," Loren said politely. Alice peered at them. They were empty-handed. No trunks, no travel bags. She gave them a long look, then a bright, understanding smile, as if she'd pieced it together. "Ah, I see." She went back downstairs. Loren looked around the room for toiletries. Finding none, he took out a cup, toothpaste, and a toothbrush and set them neatly by the basin, the toothbrushes aligned in the same direction. Hermione watched him fuss, cheeks faintly flushed, and asked coolly, "Is this part of your plan too, Mr. Morgan?" "What plan?" Loren looked innocent. "I figured this is our first long trip without grown-ups, and you don't have much experience. One room makes it easier for me to look after you. I can manage a room by myself. What if something unexpected happens? It's easier to look out for each other if we stay together." "What kind of unexpected situation? How should I know? If it can be predicted, it wouldn't be unexpected." Loren grinned. Hermione couldn't help the twitch at her lips. "You'd better be thinking that, because you're no match for me in close combat." "Why would we be fighting?" Hermione was equal parts annoyed and amused. "Let's go downstairs." All right. They locked the door and went down the wooden stairs together. Over mugs of steaming ale and a thick stew, Alice filled them in on Ben Nevis and the township at its base. Ben Nevis was an extinct volcano, vast and imposing, spanning nearly 100 acres. Its highest peak was almost always cloaked in a slab of dark, unmoving cloud. The weather there was famously unpredictable. Some parts of the mountain held snow year-round and bordered on permafrost. Fog clung to the slopes, the terrain was steep, and volcanic rock mixed with granite made the climb treacherous. That danger drew adventurers who liked to test themselves. Most came back beaten, and a few never returned. In the past 5 years alone, there had been 13 climbing deaths. There was a meteorological station on the northeast peak with a small crew, but they were rarely seen in town. The foot of the mountain was broad, dotted with scattered settlements. The village where the tavern stood was one of them. The nearest sizable town was Fort William, about 50 miles away. White clouds drifted across a low blue sky. The lazy sun crawled toward the west. This place was damp and cool from frequent rain. The sun never felt harsh, and a breeze carried the sharp chill of the high mountain snows. Accustomed to London's heat and drought, Loren and Hermione felt a little cold and added an extra layer as soon as they stepped outside. They sat at a small table by the open pub door while Alice, who worked there on and off, produced a treasured bottle of Old Dodd's wine to entertain them. Alice was lively and quick-witted, chatty without being tiresome, teasing stories about school and town that kept the conversation cheerful. "All right, I've told you everything I know. Now my turn. What do you want to know?" She beamed. "Do you have wands?" Loren asked. "Every wizard normally has a wand," Alice replied. "Can I see yours?" Loren wasn't especially worried about the statute of secrecy, and Hermione knew that since Alice already suspected something, any blame wouldn't fall on them. Loren drew his wand from his sleeve and laid it across his palm. "Applewood, dragon heartstring. I tried dozens of wands at the shop before I found this one." Hermione glanced at him and produced her own wand. "Vinewood, very responsive. It answered me as soon as I walked into the shop." "Wand shop? Tried?" Alice frowned. The two words were unfamiliar to her. Hermione filled in the gap. "After you get your letter from Hogwarts, you go to a wand shop to be fitted. Most of us go to Ollivander's. There are other makers, but his reputation is the best." The realization hit Alice like a jolt. Her eyes glazed for a few seconds, then focused. Her lips trembled. "So you bought your wands yourselves?" Before Loren could answer, a voice called from the doorway, sharp with a mixture of alarm and exasperation. "Stop talking!" An old man with close-cropped white hair and a full beard stood there carrying a bundle of greens and a half-side of beef. He looked flustered and helpless as he stared at the blonde girl at the table. Alice turned to him, and the tears came at once. "Old Dodd, liar, you bad man. Wands aren't given out by the ministry when you're grown up. I don't have any magic. I can't be a wizard." Old Dodd's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't try to defend himself, didn't meet her eyes. Loren and Hermione, realizing they had unintentionally exposed his deception, felt a pang of guilt. The freckled girl wiped her face with the back of her hand, hiccuping as she sobbed, and ran out the door, sniffling into the mountain air. Old Dodd reached out, then hesitated and let her go, only watching her go with a helpless, sorrowful look. He sighed deeply and sat down heavily at their table, setting the meat and greens aside. He grabbed the wine bottle and took a long pull. His face went pink with drink, and he only exhaled when the bottle was empty. Alice was only 3 when she came here, he said, voice rough. A tiny thing, and when she cried, she sounded worse than a banshee. Her father worked to keep them afloat, and her mother was unwell, couldn't look after her. I ran a pub and wasn't doing much business at the time, so I kept her when her mother had to be away. What did I know about looking after a child? I couldn't give her a proper upbringing. She wouldn't stop talking. When she cried, it never ended. If I'd had a choice, I'd have wrestled a troll instead. He shook the empty bottle, grabbed a bottle of malt whiskey from behind the bar, uncorked it, and drank again. When he put it down, his eyes were a little glassy but clearer. What could I do? I'd do little tricks, a few harmless spells, tell her stories about magic to calm her. As she grew, she started clamoring for a wand and for lessons. Both her parents are muggles. How could they teach her? I wanted to give her real magic, but I couldn't. I could only coax and deceive a little, pretend to send her on to proper schools so she'd be prepared in other ways. I told her that only the clever get into magic, so she worked hard. From 7 to 11, 11 to 15, I lied and lied. Last year I tricked her into entering a science contest, and she won a place at Cambridge. Despite the drink, old Dodd's face softened at the memory. A small, proud smile touched his lips. Hermione sat quiet beside him. On second thought, old Dodd hadn't actually broken the statute of secrecy. The girl had not been told any real magical secrets, only encouraged and misled. He had done wrong, but he hadn't exposed the world. Who knew she'd be so stubborn? I can't keep fooling her forever. I'm thinking of shutting up shop and running when she starts school next term. He muttered the words, then shivered and seemed to sober a little. He squinted at the 2 young faces. You 2 still students, aren't you? Finished at Hogwarts, I mean. What are you doing here? We're looking for someone, Loren said carefully. Looking for someone, old Dodd echoed. Our friend studies magical creatures. He heard Ben Nevis had a giant settlement and came to investigate. A few days ago, he sent a message saying he'd hit a snag and asked us to come help. It's not a huge problem. He could probably fix it himself, but it would take time. We heard there might be a wizard pub nearby and wanted to ask around, Loren explained. Old Dodd nodded slowly, the whiskey taking the edge off his wariness. 2 young wizards, recently out of school and traveling together. He'd done the same once. He understood. 539. News about giants. Could you tell us about the giants and what to watch out for if we go up the mountain? Those giants are just mindless brutes. If there's any difference between them and trolls, it's only that they don't swing clubs as much, and a few of them can grunt a handful of human words. Back then, their tribe sided with the Death Eaters in persecuting wizards. Barty Crouch put the Aurors on a short leash and let them use unforgivable curses to clear the giants out. After you-know-who fell, most of the worst giants who had human blood on their hands were killed. The ones who lived were guilty of lighter things, were terrified, and scattered into the mountains. Old Dodd paused, frowning as if remembering that year. Aurors wanted to pursue them to the last and wipe them out, but the mountain fog lingered and all sorts of dangerous, rare creatures lived in those heights, so the cleanup was a headache. In the end, Dumbledore presided over a Wizengamot hearing, and they decided to spare them and confine them to the mountains. We thought the giants had fled abroad. Britain's an island. Where would they flee to? Old Dodd took a sip of his drink. They don't use magic, not even the kind of innate magic other magical creatures have. They're just big, thick-skinned, and tough, but no matter how hardy, they suffocate like anyone else. Seawater in their noses will drown them, and they aren't immune to Crucio or the killing curse. They were probably beaten into submission. Lately they've been behaving, digging caves along the mountainside, eking out a living from fruit trees and wild game, and not causing as much trouble. What are they like? Can you talk to them? What decent personality would savages have? Old Dodd shook his head. They won't go out of their way to hunt people, but if you stray into their territory, you won't like the outcome. Wizards can usually get away if they don't provoke them, but muggles are different. Over the years, a few reckless climbers have gone missing. Who knows how many ended up in a giant's belly? They eat people? Hermione's voice went high and small. Her face lost color. It's not always to fill their stomachs. A human isn't much to them, too small to get stuck between the teeth. They might snatch someone to play with, torment them, and toss them away once they're dead, like a snack. Alice had counted earlier. There'd been 13 climbing disappearances in the past 5 years. No one knew how many people had died in the giant settlements. The number wasn't huge, but it wasn't negligible either. It was roughly similar to the number killed by wild animals up there. Wolf packs, wild boars. It was a shame for all the work President Elfrida Clegg and Minister Grogan Stump had put in. It should be remembered that at the first Wizengamot, 100 years ago, giants who could speak human language were classified as a human race, ranked even above merpeople. Things used to be worse. Muggles even spread rumors of monsters in the mountains. The ministry set up muggle-repelling charms, and that helped a lot. Old Dodd's voice carried his contempt. He looked at the two young wizards, still youthful-faced, and still seemed uneasy. Honestly, if you're going into giant territory to look for someone, don't alarm them. Better yet, don't go into the mountains at all. If your friend is in trouble, report it to the ministry. They'll handle it. Thank you for your concern, Loren said calmly. He felt real gratitude for this old wizard, whom they'd betrayed and who, despite his sorrow, still showed concern. We can take care of ourselves. The mountain is exactly the sort of place where certain magics work well. Disillusionment charms for hiding, animagus forms for moving easily. If the giants spot us, we can apparate away. We won't be in mortal danger. Animagus, apparition, no mortal danger. Old Dodd mumbled the names of those charms. Regulations allowed young wizards to take their apparition test at 17, but that didn't mean every 17-year-old could apparate. In fact, only a few passed. Animagus was harder still. A nimble animal form would suit the mountains, but how many wizards could become animagi? Even after years secluded in the countryside and out of touch, he knew Britain didn't have more than a handful of registered animagi. Old Dodd suspected something else. The boy had only mentioned hiding and escaping, not fighting. He did not believe a wizard who could manage both animagus and apparition wouldn't know any offensive spells. With the talent those two had shown, any spell was possible, maybe even an unforgivable curse. Are Hogwarts graduates all like this now? He found the thought shocking. His worry eased a little, though he still had a soft spot for the giants. When will you go? The mountain path is rough, steep, time-consuming, and the fog can be disorienting. You could easily get lost. Why not stay here tonight and let me see you off in the morning? That would be very kind of you, sir. You two picked a lucky day. Old Dodd pointed at a half-rack of beef ribs on a nearby counter and rose slowly. In a place like this, it's hard to get fresh, decent ingredients. These ribs have some brisket on them. I'll cut them up and make beef stew with potatoes. Alice likes it best. At the words, beef stew with potatoes, Loren pursed his lips. Hermione smiled and offered, Do you need our help, sir? No, you two go wander around. Wander around? Old Dodd, carrying the beef, turned toward the kitchen and hid his shy old face. If you happen to meet Alice, tell her we're having beef stew with potatoes for lunch. All right, Mr. Dodd, we'll tell her. Loren and Hermione smiled. It was obvious the old man hadn't rushed out to buy ingredients because trade was slow at the inn, nor because he'd craved something special, and certainly not because he expected guests. His daughter, who studied away from home, had come back for the holidays, and she loved beef stew with potatoes. Entrusted with their task, the two left the pub and walked the rutted country lane. The stones were uneven and full of potholes. Hidden puddles lurked beneath, ready to splash mud up their legs if they weren't careful. The small village at the mountain's base had only a dozen households now. A few families had moved away in recent years. Young people were rare. Elderly folk who preferred not to live in town tended their front yard flowers, and the place felt quiet and ordinary. 540. Insomnia is good. Every weekend, the girl went back to her old home in the countryside. She would tell the owner of the quiet pub next door about the strange new things she'd seen in the city, and in return, get some half-true, half-false magic anecdotes from the old man. He was an old rogue who used gentle lies to prod others into working harder. She was a girl who, during school breaks, chose the quiet of the country over the bustle of the city. After more than a decade together, they were no different from grandfather and granddaughter, only without the trivial matter of blood. If Loren and Hermione, the two young wizards, hadn't accidentally exposed the old man's fabrications, those lies might have collapsed on their own in 2 years' time. Would old Dodd really have closed his pub and hidden somewhere Alice couldn't find him? How could he bear to? It was the same for Alice. Her cherished dream of wizarding greatness had been shattered. But what mattered more than any illusion of magic was the companionship she'd had for over 10 years with that deceitful old wizard. When she heard lunch would be beef stew with potatoes and that the old swindler himself had made it, tears streamed unbidden from the corners of her eyes. She followed Loren and Hermione half-heartedly. She had just cried in front of the old deceiver. When the two of them led her back to the pub, she couldn't help but blush. By the time the potatoes and beef stew had simmered and fragrant, it was almost exactly noon. Wizards' cooking was always simpler and faster than Muggle kitchens. For the most tedious stages, a wizard only needed to wave a wand. A cleaning charm washed the ingredients thoroughly, a severing charm cut the beef into uniform pieces, so many steps completed in minutes. Old Dodd had studied the recipe obsessively, absorbing tips from every cookbook. He was neither a purist who worshipped the raw, original flavor of ingredients, nor a postmodernist chasing complex layers. He wanted both. Every step was meticulous, dicing the beef, blanching it to remove scum, briefly frying it with ginger before stewing, cutting the potatoes into uneven small chunks, toasting spices like cinnamon and bay leaves to release their aroma, adding coarse salt, black pepper, soybean paste, and other seasonings, then bringing it all to a long, slow simmer. The fresh beef was richly fragrant, a clear sheen of beef fat floating on top. The scents of the spices were distinct and sharp, drifting into the air. The potatoes, grown by old Dodd himself without magic, varied in size and shape. When stewed until tender, they soaked up the beefy flavor. Loren chewed the tender meat, its fibers soaked with gravy, and the grainy potato pieces made him realize for a moment that potatoes weren't so bad after all. Hermione preferred the potatoes, especially mashed ones soaked in gravy, soft, mushy, and salty. Alice had a mouthful of beef, a mouthful of potato, her lips glistening with oil. To make room for more, she had to shove aside the little heap of grievance in her stomach. After they'd eaten their fill, old Dodd sipped his whiskey and watched Alice awkwardly clear the dishes. The heavy stone in his chest finally settled, his brows relaxed, and he smiled at Loren. "Loren, Hermione," he said, "you two just graduated. Do you know what's been happening at Hogwarts lately?" "What would you like to know, Mr. Dodd?" Loren asked. "I read in the paper that Professor Dumbledore was dismissed by the Wizengamot, accused of spreading false statements to stir up fear and unrest. Is that true?" "It's complicated," Hermione said. "The paper only published a censored portion. You probably know some of the mess around Crouch. On the night of the Quidditch World Cup final, everything went wrong. Barty Crouch Jr., a Death Eater, escaped in the chaos, allied himself with you-know-who, attacked Mad-Eye Moody, infiltrated Hogwarts, and after a year of planning, completed Voldemort's return during the Triwizard Tournament final." Loren added carefully, "Dumbledore warned people, but the Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge, didn't want to believe that Voldemort had come back. He clung to power and the idea of stability, and so he slandered Dumbledore and stripped him of many positions." "Lord Voldemort, eh?" Old Dodd nodded, thoughtful. When he spoke the name calmly, Hermione's eyes widened. "Mr. Dodd, aren't you afraid of the Dark Lord?" "What's there to be afraid of?" Old Dodd replied with a crooked smile. "I'm 70 this year. My parents are gone, I've no children, no property worth taking. I live out in a remote village at the foot of a mountain. Would a Death Eater go out of their way to bother me?" He finished the remaining whiskey in his glass. "And there's Professor Dumbledore. He managed to defeat Voldemort once. Will there be surprises this time? Maybe it'll be over faster. I can only hope so. I choose to trust him." "Mr. Dodd, you're wiser than the Minister for Magic," Hermione said softly. "Just lived a few decades longer, that's all," Old Dodd said, glancing toward the kitchen as he picked up his empty glass. "You two chat. I'll go talk to Alice. That child is still sulking." Loren and Hermione didn't feel like talking. They sat side by side on the smooth marble steps at the pub entrance, legs stretched out, looking up at a patch of white on a distant mountain peak that was snowy all year round. The sky was a pure blue with a few low, cottony clouds, as if one could touch them by climbing the ridge. They watched until their necks grew tired and then adopted a lazier posture. Loren tilted his head back until he found the most comfortable angle. Hermione's faint scent filled his nostrils. A few playful strands of hair brushed his cheek and tickled, but he was too lazy to lift a hand to brush them away. In less than 5 minutes, his eyelids began to droop. After a few blinks, they wouldn't open. "Don't sleep here," Hermione said, gently shaking his shoulder. "If you nap now, you'll have trouble sleeping tonight." "It's fine. I don't want to sleep tonight anyway," Loren murmured. Hermione looked at him, puzzled. Rubus Hagrid sat cross-legged in a cave, chewing herbs he'd freshly picked and pressing the poultice into bruises on his cheek, wincing as he worked. Beside him, Grop lay full and slowly drifting off, and the sight brought an involuntary smile to Hagrid's face. Grop had been much more well-behaved today, only a few clumsy hooks and no attempts to grab him by the leg and fling him out of the cave. He must finally recognize Hagrid as family. Maybe the barbecue seasoning had helped too. In any case, things were moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, Beauxbatons was about to start classes, and Olympe had left early to get things in order, so Hagrid was alone to enjoy this small triumph. He rubbed his aching chest and allowed himself to daydream about a brighter future. He wondered who Dumbledore would send to meet him when they returned to Hogwarts. It would be good to go back. Grop would like it there, Hagrid thought, and smiled again as the giant beside him sighed in his sleep.